Tip Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. Slattery'sGarage.ie.
Good morning, welcome along to Tip Today, 1800 938 007, our free phone number if you want to call us. It won't cost you anything, and Leanne is producing today. Coming up on the show, we'll be speaking to Cllr Declan Burgess in just a little while, and he is concerned about the growing crisis in youth detention capacity. Ireland's reincarceration levels. Dr. Daniel McFadden will discuss his piece in the Irish Examiner. We'll be hearing from Brian Killoran from the Ukraine Civil Society. Children who question their gender are being paid with vouchers to spend in Uber Eats, and retailers like John Lewis when taking part in a puberty blocker trial backed by the NHS. We'll be teasing that out too. The story of Ireland continues with John G. O'Donnell. So all of that and lots more on the way. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. You can email tiptoday@tipfm.com. Just to remind you again, we have that fantastic prize, overnight stay for two at the Talbot Hotel in Clonmel, to highlight the wedding extravaganza weekend that's happening this coming Saturday and Sunday. It includes a full Irish breakfast, full access to the award-winning leisure facilities, and couples can explore the Talbot Hotel's stunning wedding facilities at their spring showcase. And My Dress Bridal Wear from Carrick-on-Suir will be hosting an exclusive pop-up bridal sale with beautiful gowns at exceptional prices, and we'll be talking about that a little later on. But if you want to get involved in the competition, all you have to do is text Talbot along with your name and your details to 083 311 3311. If you start doing that now, we will announce the finalist a little later on, and we'll also be talking about that wedding showcase in the Talbot in the final hour of the programme. Let's have a look at the front pages of some of your newspapers now. It being Wednesday, the local publications are on your shelves. The Nina Guardian, their lead story on Friday, the official turning of the sod for a new housing development in Nina took place, and on the Drummond Road there, with building already having commenced for the construction of 307 new homes for the area. 100 of these homes are expected to be built this year, so some good news there. On the Tipperary Star, golden opportunity lost is the headline there. The birthplace of the GAA not properly celebrated, and there's a picture of Hayes' Hotel, needless to say. And the front page goes on to tell us no signage, no GAA trail, and no heritage centre in Thurles. The Nationalist leading with that awful story, heartbreak after the death of young nurse. A nurse killed in a hit-and-run collision on her way to work on Friday night has been described as a kind and gentle and loving person. Pallasgreen nurse Anya O'Reilly died tragically while on her way to work to care for others in a three-car coalition. To the national newspapers then, to the Indo. The lead story on the Indo today, the coalition is pressing ahead with plans for a critical care wing at the Rotunda Maternity Hospital, despite Comisión Planola's decision to overturn planning permission. Now, the government is examining whether the critical infrastructure bill can be used to bypass the planning block. The Irish Times, and they're leading with the headline, Russia imports huge quantities of Irish-made parts for attack drones. Also on the Times today, Meta, the global tech giant, wants the Irish government to use its coming European Union presidency to advocate for the scrapping of a law that would crack down on addictive social media features like infinite scroll. To the Irish Examiner, and it's dominated by a picture of a man described right across the newspapers as an icon. Of course, the late Jesse Jackson is pictured there. A picture, in fact, from 1984, inspired by Martin Luther King Jr. He was prominent in the civil rights movement from a young age, made a couple of attempts at the presidency as well. Also on the Examiner today, we're reading that Limerick's directly elected mayor, John Moran, has launched a kind of a broadside at a number of councillors, accusing them of being hostile towards them. He said, I've always said that change has been really hard for a lot of people. Ultimately, I want to deliver on the mandate I have. And finally, a look at the Daily Mail and the lead story there. Judges have warned the public over solicitors using artificial intelligence to compose court documents following 3 cases having to be thrown out over error-strewn submissions. So that's a look at what's making headlines today. Would you like to make comment on any of that? If you would, once again, you can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now, this week, Councillor Declan Burgess released a statement calling on the government to urgently work with all stakeholders to address the growing crisis in youth detention capacity, staffing and early intervention supports, with a particular focus on Oberstown Children Detention Campus. And he joins me now. Good morning to you, Declan.
Good morning, Fran. Thanks for inviting me on.
You're very welcome, and good to talk to you today. This is you calling on the government, that includes your own party, Fine Gael, to address this issue. Has the government failed? Because communities, I notice it out near where I live, Declan, communities no longer feel safe.
Yeah, well, I suppose this has been a growing concern for a long number of months that I've had. And I suppose this statement was done in, I suppose, trying to be proactive on the issue, because it is getting worse and we have to look at it. But also frustration on my own part that government know that there's an issue here. They've failed to address it. And, you know, I say that with the clearest of vision when it comes to this issue in particular, because I suppose since I've released a statement, I've heard from so many of my council colleagues right around the country. Even yesterday I was talking to someone from Kerry, Cork, Dublin. This has been an issue not just in Tipperary and Cashel, where I'm from, where we've seen no choice but the judicial system to effectively being forced to release offenders without any consequences, not because it was the right thing to do, but because capacity does not exist in our state. And for your listeners, Fran, Oberstown is the national Ireland's national facility for detention and education of young people under the age of 18.
And what is the capacity of that, Declan?
Before the courts.
What is the capacity of Oberstown? 46.
40 male beds and 6 female beds. But I suppose that's essentially, you know, without drastic change, has been stagnant. Since the early 2000s, when Oberstown was first opened, you know, those increases, I suppose they've warned against too many increases without the proper resourcing and staffing. But I suppose, like all the Garda sources and reports, the more I look into this, I've repeatedly highlighted the damaging reality that we face in this country, that serious offenders, you know, are being released because there's simply no space. And Fran, I'm sure many of your listeners and you would agree with me, that's not good enough. And it really undermines what you're saying, the public confidence in the justice system, and it sends the wrong message to these young people themselves who believe there's no real consequences for serious crime and for this type of behaviour. So, like, I suppose this isn't just dropping down the hammer. These type of facilities, you know, are really important for that early intervention to make sure that, you know, we're smart with crime. You know, we have to get to these young people earlier, because we don't want to see them, you know, in a system for the rest of their life, in and out of prison. And I suppose right now communities do deserve to feel safe, and you know, we've seen cases there where, you know, like 46 beds for the entire country. We need to start having a national conversation. If expansion isn't an option in Oberstown, do we need a second facility, maybe in the southern end of the country or something? Because I suppose Oberstown's based in Dublin, or, you know, we really need to look at this. There needs to be a conversation, and we need to find that balance, because I really think, and I've spoken to people, you know, in the courts, in the guards, in youth service themselves, and everyone is feeling undermined, because, you know, we might see proactive policing where they get these people, these young people, they see the crime that they've committed, when these crimes are being committed, there's also a victim that wants justice. If it's a shopkeeper who's been burgled for the 100th time again, or if it's a family or property that's being destroyed, those victims.
Of course, but one of the things you're calling for is serious investment in early intervention and prevention. Do you know, I think people are kind of tired of hearing about that all of the time, because we have invested in intervention and in prevention, but it doesn't seem to have done anything very much, Declan.
Yeah, well, look, to be honest, early intervention isn't being soft on crime in any way. I really think, I suppose my whole call here is about the rule of law, and if young people are, I suppose, committing serious crimes, there needs to be a balance. There needs to be that support base for them, but there needs to be consequences. And right now, we might be getting some of the supports for them, but we're not getting the consequences because of the lack of facilities. And Alberstown has failed, the state has failed to bring Alberstown, into the future, despite population growth and despite an increase in the actual documented numbers of serious youth offences. The capacity has not kept up with that pace. So, as a state, and this isn't just a local issue, as a state, they need to be authorised to have a bigger capacity. And if they're worried about that, we need to look at, what type of investment we're doing in terms of getting staff for them. And if this is not a possibility, do they need to do a feasibility study on another centre in another part of the country, where we might be able to get staff from people, that are living and working in a certain area, that in these type of youth service, in these type of detention centres already as such. So I really think the time for ignoring the issue has come to such a head, because, like I said, the courts are there with young people before them on serious crimes and being left with no other option.
But what is your answer, though, Declan, when you see literally children committing crimes? And I'm talking here specifically about Cashel, because I'm sure you hear the same stories that I do. These young people will commit crimes, and they'll basically tell the victims that, look, you can complain me all you want, but we know that because of our age, the Gardaí can't do anything about this. And they simply trundle on and do it again a couple of days later.
Yeah, I suppose, look, we've seen personally in Cashel, an issue, 14 to 17-year-olds causing serious issue. And I don't want to get into it in too much detail, but we've seen really proactive policing in that regard, where, unfortunately, if a young person is sent to Alberstown, and if we're lucky enough to get a bed at this occasion, we're lucky enough to get a bed in Alberstown, they might only be able to stay, for a short period of time, which that won't help in terms of the consequence and the I suppose the intervention that's needed, because these repeat offenders also, that's a real concern, and it really undermines the process when they're not, when I suppose the victim, the state as well as the victim, and or the actual criminal themselves are not actually given proper time in a detention centre where they need to.
I tend to
serve their sentence.
I tend to run a mile when I hear about feasibility studies and task forces and all of these kind of things. Well, I mean, we know we have a capacity issue, so we know we need another venue. We need somewhere else. I mean, that's really obvious.
They're not willing to invest in the actual centre itself in Alberstown and Dublin. They have to. In my opinion, they have to look at the expansion of the service. So they have to look at a second facility. And I suppose there obviously has to be a process in place of where it gets selected. I suppose location selection is everything. Obviously, essential, but also you need an availability of these professionals that maybe potentially could get a job in this centre. So I suppose the availability of those people, is really, really important. But I really think, Fran, I've had a lot of dealings with these type of issues in the last number of years in particular, and I've studied this. I'm going to raise this at every opportunity I can internally. With my colleagues in government,
it just concerns me when you say, I can't go into that too much. You say, I wonder about this. Are we speaking out, and are we speaking plainly, or are we stopped in some way from speaking out, do you think, about this particular issue?
Fran,
Is that part of what's happening?
You know me, and like, I suppose I'm not going to come on here and seek sound bites. I really feel that me talking about individual cases isn't going to help anyone, and I feel it undermines those cases, particularly those that are really sensitive locally, because of the victims, that maybe have been targeted multiple times. So I'm not going to get into individual cases because there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of them, not just in Cashel, but in Clonmel, in Thurles and Nina, and in every county, in this country has seen young people under the age of 18 cause serious harm to people and to property, and the lack of respect for the law. And what I'm asking here is that we should start a conversation nationally. I thank you for highlighting it, because it's really important people know that guards are trying their best locally. Everyone is trying their best, and then they're met with this massive stumbling block.
Yeah, and they must be so frustrated. They must be really frustrated.
I've seen the case where the case is so solid, and it brought to court, and depending on the time of the week, they could be told, you deserve the slap in the wrist, you deserve 6 months in Albertstown, but unfortunately the system is failing once again, and these people are released without consequences, with a smile on their face, and because the capacity does not exist. That to me makes me sick to my stomach. It's not good enough. And immediate action on capacity and staffing is badly needed to address that. But then on a second fold, there is so much investment needed into getting a proper facility, a second facility or an expansion of that facility, because we need to protect communities, we need to uphold the rule of law, and we really need to provide this structured rehabilitation, and that mission is now under severe threat. It's under severe strain because the resources aren't there.
Can you give us an update on the Castletown Park development, Declan? What is the current story? Has work commenced there?
Yeah. There's contractors there the last number of weeks or so. Weather hasn't helped, but a lot of work has gone in to phase 1 of the project. And look, for your listeners, this is obviously in the fields connecting the town to the rock, the Bishop's Walk, the historic trail that we upgraded. We upgraded the back of the court where the town walls are, a new walkway there, and obviously a number of years ago, the Boher na Marv, from the Rock to the Camas Road. But right now, phase 1 is being delivered, and we got funding for phase 2 just before Christmas. So we're progressing right now. There's installation of some benches, some play material. There's a low-level maze gone in for kids to play in. There's new planting. There's some wall repairs going on soon as well. I think that's starting next week. We've had some footpath repairs leading up to the rock itself at that entrance to the Bishop's Walk. Yeah. It's really exciting. I suppose phase 2, now that we got funding, we'll be able to start pretty much continue on the project. So we'll see the boardwalk being installed, and I suppose this is going to really improve the connectivity to the site. It's a really sensitive site beside the rock, but also it's going to, I suppose, support people with prams and buggies and wheelchairs, anyone with mobility issues. That boardwalk that will bring you right through adjacent to the Bishop's Walk trail itself. Hopefully now we'll be putting in a new funding application to deliver phase 3, which is the amphitheatre at the bottom by the Camas Road, a couple of new gravel paths also around the site. It's really exciting.
It certainly is. My only fear for Cashel, and it's the same with so many towns, Declan, but I had a good look over the weekend when I was in Cashel, and so many premises closed down now. That's worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worrying.
On the main
I
street,
believe and I believe there's 2 new businesses opening up in Ladies Weld. One at the O'Neill's and one up in the old Paddy Fahy. So that's really good news. So, there was a lot of generational retirements, in Cashel, and that concern to vacancy in our town. But I'm confident with a lot of stuff like this, like the town park is just one fold of efforts to being made to improve the visitor experience in Cashel, because this isn't just for locals to have finally a town park, this outdoor infrastructure, a facility that the town has been longing for years. But it's also improves the visitor experience, where visitors can come and have a nice place to sit down, maybe have a picnic, walk through from the Rock to the town centre. In terms of that long age conversation, how do we get the hundreds of thousands of visitors down to the Rock? This is that bridge to the town centre that we've always.
And what are you hoping then? Are you hoping that business might follow that? If you know what I mean. I mean, if there's that sort of footfall down into the town.
And I think it opens right into the Main Street car park, right into the Camas Road, into the back of the courthouse also. And I feel, I feel that this is a really exciting opportunity for those businesses because, and I've spoken to a lot of businesses, particularly in the town centre, that are really excited for the town park because they do feel that there's going to be more wanderers, more people, coming into the town, having a look around. And I suppose given the importance of the site location, I think that really adds to what is going to be successful for Cashel. But certainly, Cashel needs this boost. We need it for our town centre. I suppose now with the new town theme and, an impending application for the Rural Regeneration Development Fund for our town centre and for different town projects, I think it's actually, it's something that is ambitious, but something we're really looking forward to in the town.
All right, Declan, thanks for your time this morning. Thank you. Good morning to you. That's Cllr Declan Burgess speaking to us from Cashel this morning. 1800 938 007.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Dr. Daniel McFadden recently wrote a fascinating piece for the Irish Examiner where he suggests that the Enoch Burke case highlights Ireland's problem with reincarceration. And I'm joined now by Dr. Daniel McFadden, Assistant Professor in Social Work at Maynooth. Good morning to you, Daniel.
Morning, Fran.
And thanks very much for your time this morning. I know you don't want to go into the Burke case in detail while it's still before the courts, but you do make the point that it shows there aren't many tools available to the courts to respond effectively when offences are repeatedly committed.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the Burke case has been covered quite well by the Irish media, and I think people are starting to see this kind of cycle that he's been going through, going to prison, released from prison, recommitting the offence and going back again. And I suppose I was really interested in that because I've seen people start to get exacerbated with the process and starting to think, oh God, it's not working. This prison thing isn't working. And all I could think was from my own background as a social worker and also as an academic within the area is that this is many people's stories, His is very well publicised. But for many, particularly some of our most vulnerable citizens, those with mental health issues and those with substance use issues, the cycle of re-imprisonment is a constant for them.
There's a big difference, I suppose, with maybe the cases you're referring to and the Burke case, in that the Burke case, well, my understanding is it certainly seems to be around contempt of court and repeated contempt of court. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I suppose it's a violation of a court order, but essentially I suppose the options open to the individual or to the individual judges are the same, which are limited, is my point. And I think the Irish public were seeing the sort of limited apparatus that the courts have available to them when someone repeatedly, violates a court order and the same sort of underlying reasons are behind it. And despite this, and the imprisonment sentence is not working, they don't have any option but to resort to re-imprisonment.
What sort of option do you think should be available to them, or can we look to other jurisdictions, Daniel, for this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in a sense, there's no real need to look to other jurisdictions because from a policy and research perspective, there's a lot of material out there in terms of where we can go. The Department of Justice itself recently commissioned a report into community sentence orders, which are basically programs that judges can opt for instead of short prison sentences. They can put them on to community sentence orders, which is basically a program in the community that they can engage in. The issue with that is that particularly individuals who might be experiencing mental health or substance use issues are deemed often unsuitable for community sentence orders because of their condition they're experiencing. So what that report recommended, and I think what we need to see, is community sentence orders that are more specifically set up for individuals with those specific needs. And, similarly, outside of my own article, when I wrote it, I wasn't aware of the RT Investigates programme, which came out, a number of weeks after, and really highlighted the plight of people with mental health issues within our prison system. So the issues are linked, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking earlier on, in fact, at the top of the programme about, incarceration of young people, and we were talking about Oberstown, and again, the options available to the courts and the frustration also then of the Gardaí when they see that, a lot of the time, even though young people are guilty, there's nowhere to send them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can imagine that is a frustration, but I would query, when there is a lack of spaces in Oberstown, what is happening there? Yeah. Should we need that amount of spaces for young people? What's happening upstream? What isn't occurring for those young people? Again, I was a TUSLA child protection social worker at the beginning of my career, so I would have accompanied young people to court when they were in the care of the state and when they were handed sentences for Oberstown. And I don't believe any of those young people were served with a custodial sentence. But what had happened was that they had been failed, from young children experiencing, adverse events, from violence to neglect, and then growing up and becoming teenagers without, parental supports, parental guidance, struggling with numerous multiple care placements often, and then ending up. So again, I would caution against the idea of Oberstown being some sort of fix or some sort of solution, because what you're going to see is those young people being incarcerated, their needs not being met, they will then move into a much harsher adult system, which will likely re-traumatize them, lead to further offending, make people in the community more unsafe again. So I think that it's a good point in a sense, but I would question the upstream of it rather than the downstream.
That's interesting, and you know this from your own previous experience of working in social care.
Well, so I was a child protection social worker for TUSLA at the beginning of my career. I'm an academic now, and more recently I was a forensic mental health social worker. So part of the reason that I do the research that I do is that when I was a TUSLA child protection social worker, I worked with young people, again, huge exposures to violence from a very young age, neglect, abuse, that type of thing. Then when I went in to work in prisons and forensic systems, I was working with the same people, essentially. There was a very direct line between those early experiences of trauma, lack of social support, and then going on in offending behaviour, the state responding with incarceration, re-traumatisation, and just an endless cycle.
And I take your point, and a very well made point. However, I know that in my own locality in recent times, houses have been broken into by young people, and there's a general feeling of, fear in the area. And I know that most people would like the perpetrators to be put away. And I guess you could understand that feeling, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. On a very individual level, as a person, everyone wants to feel safe in their community. Yeah. That's absolutely undoubted. But what I would say to that is that actually assuring safety is about getting to the nub of what is going on, addressing the underlying issues that lead to the criminal behaviour. In one sense, we have basic instincts around the idea that, if they're locked up, that will serve us and that will keep us safe. But ultimately, we cannot lock people up forever, particularly children. And often, if they're not able to learn from those processes, or we realise that those processes aren't working, as we have seen before in the past, then we as a society need to sort of reconfigure that and ask, okay, do we need to take a different approach to ensuring that Are there, ultimately, when you think about these young people, they often come from the same communities, the same socio-economic disadvantage. And so we need to look at it on a broader way. But I get the individual instinct to want to feel safe. But in a way, we have to, as a system and as a society, we have to rise above it and think about collective safety.
And in your experience, have you seen suitable programmes be effective in these cases, in some of these cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's numerous different types of programs. There's some programs that already are running within Ireland, but they're limited. They have waiting lists, that type of thing. Like Extern would be a charity that would run a lot of services. Some of my previous experience was in Australia as well, where I worked in the forensic system there. And again, there are such a thing, but again, it's often about funding. And it's about capacity. Like, say, for example, in terms of sharing the vision, which is sort of the main mental health policy for Ireland, there's a number of recommendations in there which would support sort of diversion schemes and that type of a thing for people with mental health issues. But, under a lot of them, the outcomes haven't been met yet. And in the policy itself, dependencies, which are basically means, what needs to happen for this to occur. It's about approval of funding, approval of post-capital investment. And until the political will is there to prioritise these issues and to ensure that funding comes down, that the posts come down, that the capital investment is made, then it's unlikely that you're going to see change. That needs to happen. It's very systemic.
And two questions finally. Are judges aware of these programs, and have they the power to make a choice and say, no, we won't incarcerate you, but here's the other option? Have they the power to do that?
They do have the power, but again, that report commissioned by the Department of Justice would outline that on one hand, they are reluctant because they feel like they need to satisfy the public with whatever sentence they hand down. Ultimately, that's one thing. The other issue is the resourcing and provision of these community sentence orders. So regionally, are community sentence orders available in the regions that we're talking about? They might be available in Dublin, but they might not be available in other parts of the country, for example. Equally, the community sentence orders need to be available to those who are most vulnerable and those who are more likely to be engaging in that type of behaviour. So again, they need to be suitable for people with mental health issues and substance use issues. And sometimes that's not the case, so judges don't then have that option.
Yeah, I was sort of waiting for some of this reaction to come in, but several listeners, and I just sort of compile some of them together, making the point that, many of us came from areas of poverty and deprivation, but we didn't go around, as criminals. We didn't go and burglar old people's homes and the like. Daniel, what do you? I'm sure you've heard that argument a lot. What do you say? What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, look, again, I think that people can come from areas of socio-economic disadvantage and do quite well. But my experience, and I would have interviewed prisoners as part of my own PhD research, is it's a compounding of that trauma. It's on one hand socio-economic disadvantage, poverty, etc., and that's maybe coupled with things like physical abuse, sexual abuse in the home, all of those different issues, and it's about being able to respond. Many people within our communities, live and exist in poverty and don't commit crime, but however, it is an aggregating factor for that type of behaviour. So it's not just socioeconomic disadvantage, it's a multitude of things.
Good to talk to you today. Interesting conversation, Daniel. Thank you for your time. Thank you and good morning to you. Bye-bye to you now. That's Dr. Daniel McFadden there, who's Assistant Professor in Social Work at Maynooth University, and he recently wrote that piece for the Irish Examiner, suggesting, I suppose, that through the Enoch Burke case that has highlighted Ireland's problem with re-incarceration. How do you feel about that? 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1-800-938-007.
Now, the Ukraine Civil Society Forum has called on the government to reverse recent reductions in accommodation support provided to Ukrainians in Ireland as life-threatening winter conditions in the war-torn country, where electricity and heating supply are targeted by daily Russian drones and missiles. And Brian Killoran of the UCSF, he's national coordinator of the organisation, and he joins me now. Good morning to you, Brian.
Morning, Fran.
And thanks for your time today. You would like to see a reversal of that reduction from 90 days to 30 days, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose what we're drawing attention to is, over the last 4 years, obviously, the offer and the support provided to Ukrainians in Ireland and in Europe has been phenomenal. There were policy changes along the way, including last year. The offer of accommodation was reduced down to a 90-day period. So 90 days whereby if somebody came into the country on temporary protection, they would be accommodated for 90 days, given integration support and assistance then to stand on their own 2 feet, essentially. So that was one cut. That was mid-2025. Then in November last year, the government decided to cut that down again to 30 days, which was a huge cut. And I think all of us at the time were thinking, that's not enough time. That's not enough time for people to come in, to find their feet, to get their bearings, and to sort out alternative accommodation. Now, at the time, the government articulated that about rising numbers. September, October, there was a bump in new arrivals temporarily, and they were worried about capacity in the system. But those increased numbers didn't continue. So November, December into January, those numbers halved again, basically. So that was a temporary situation. And at the moment, what they call the designated accommodation centres, which is the reception centres they use for this 30 days, are only very, very partially full. So there's only about 168 people in a system of 6 designated accommodation centres that have a capacity of 1,800 people. So there is capacity within the system. Even if the government wants to close down some of those centres, that's still possible. There's still capacity there to reverse the policy, because we're seeing extremely difficult situations beginning to arise where people are coming in, not able to find anything by the end of the 30 days and having to leave, sometimes with very small children that came all the way from Ukraine to Ireland to go back again to, as you said at the start, daily missile and drone attacks, -20 temperatures in Kyiv at night time. It's a very serious situation, and I think we need to find a middle ground as opposed to just cutting our support completely.
Yeah, I mean, to be upfront about it, the reason they would have cut it down to 30 days, I guess, is to cut down on the numbers coming from Ukraine into the country, and where that's concerned, it has succeeded, I suppose.
It kind of has, although the numbers are more or less the same as they were throughout 2025. So like I said, there was a bump in September, October, where about 400 people a week were coming, which was large numbers. It's gone down to about 150 a week again in November, December, January, and it was like that before September and October as well. So the numbers have stayed pretty consistent, because there's been polling done of Ukrainians numerous times, and the reasons that they travel are not for the accommodation offer. The reasons that they travel are because they held out as long as they could, and they decided that it's not getting any safer. If anything, it's getting worse. So we need to now make the decision to go, But not for accommodation, people are travelling. So I think you're dead right. It is the state's intention to deter people from coming. I don't think it's about capacity. I don't think it's about rising numbers. I think it is a deterrent measure. But I don't think that's worked either, because I think the drive that's driving people to travel continues, and it continues into the winter as well, which, magnifies everything.
Is it not just the government? Is there a general kind of a compassion fatigue, I suppose, where everybody is concerned at this point? Is that your experience, Brian?
Well, I think that's absolutely what happens in these circumstances. So it's not just about Ukraine. And any of these circumstances where a humanitarian situation, like the Syrian conflict, for example, in 2015, 2016, an initial outpouring of huge humanitarian support, the public falling over themselves to do things, as happened with Ukraine as well. But that now it's 4 years later. So there's an understandable compassion fatigue. It's a normal thing to happen. But as we said in our press release, while it might be wishful thinking on the government's part, that we kind of wish this would all go away as an issue, unfortunately it's not going away. The war continues. There's no sign of peace. There's kind of fairly stilted peace talks that are not really, I don't think anybody has huge hope for. So unfortunately, the situation persists. So we have to get over our compassion fatigue. And like I say, find the balance. We're not saying go back to what we were doing at the start, go back to a full kind of, no holds barred kind of humanitarian support, but find the middle ground. There is a middle ground where we can still continue to support people and recognise the reality of the situation.
And could I be devil's advocate on this for a moment, Brian, and say that, you're well aware there's huge issues with cost of living for ordinary people nowadays. And, if we go back on the figures, 173 million of humanitarian and stabilisation support, Irish aid to NGOs just this year, 3 million, wider packages, 36 million, non-lethal military, 250 million. It's enormous sums of money contributed by this country. Is there a case to be made that, at times you have to say, we've done our bit?
Yeah, well, those are, the figures involved in the financial support both to Ukraine, Ukrainians in Ukraine and to the humanitarian efforts there and across Europe, really, in every European country, including Ireland, over the last 4 years has been enormous, And this, nobody envisioned this situation happening. Nobody wanted it to happen, least of all Ukrainians themselves. They didn't want to be in this position. So, at the same time, we are involved in, essentially, this is our part of it. This is our part of the support to kind of supporting Ukrainians, but also pushing back on the Russian aggression in Ukraine and being part of a European effort. So, and to a large extent, investing in integration actually pays off. So the reality is people are travelling. The reality is people are able to travel because of temporary protection. If they come in here and we don't give them appropriate support and adequate support, they may end up in situations of homelessness. They may end up taking a much longer time to actually get standing on their feet than they could have if we actually get them that initial burst of support at the start. So there's a balance to be struck between the investment that we put into it and the outcomes that we get. And if we're not getting good outcomes because we're cutting the support down to something really that is unworkable, then that's a bad investment of finances as well, So really, in the long term, if we invest up front in trying to get people standing on their own 2 feet, about 28,000 of the Ukrainians in Ireland are working at the moment from a working age cohort of about 50,000. So that's over half of them in employment, which is massive. So they're going in the right direction. They're standing on their own 2 feet. They just need that initial spurt of support from us for 90 days to try and get on their own 2 feet. Their desire is to be self-sufficient. And they're demonstrating that desire.
What are you hearing from Ukrainian people in Ireland at the moment? I'm sure you're across that piece today from President Zelensky, where he's talking about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but literally being bullied by America at this stage to do a deal with Russia, probably conceding land as well. What is the general feeling among the Ukrainians, do you think, about this, Brian?
Well, we, as you said, we're a forum. We have 121 members across the country that are working in support of not just Ukrainians, but migrant communities in general. But our focus is on Ukraine, obviously. And I think we had our meeting yesterday, and one of the feelings, that's coming back again and again and again is people are feeling just kind of lost, a little bit like they can't go forward and they can't go backwards. And there's a lot of mental health impacts from that. So people are beginning to exhibit signs of depression, they're beginning to exhibit signs of stress, and actually PTSD as well, because after a while, after the adrenaline wears off of having moved country and gone to somewhere else and the adrenaline levels go down, people begin to realise what's happened. They begin to realise the displacement, and it's traumatic. So I think people are still, the Ukrainian community, they're this weekend now they've been marking the 4 years. Part of that is they're absolutely, demonstrating their thanks and their gratitude to the Irish public for what has happened over the last 4 years, and they're asking people to stick with them. They're asking people to stay, please, keep on the course with us. We're doing our best to try and get through this. But as you say, it's very disheartening because it doesn't look like, a really workable peace deal in Ukraine is on the cards anytime soon. And they very much see themselves, as they are, which is the victims of the aggression of a large imperialist state beside them that has no interest in peace in Ukraine, really. Just has an interest in a subjugated Ukraine. So they still feel that desire to resist, but they also, feel that fatigue too. They're exhausted, frankly,
Brian, thanks for your time this morning. We wish you well. Thank you for coming on with us. Thank you. Good morning
to you.
Thank
you, Fran.
Bye-bye. That's Brian Killoran there of the Ukraine Civil Society Forum. How do you feel about that? 1800 938 007. Leanne is with me, the Queen of the Archives, back again. What is this about a toilet seat?
This is brilliant, Fran. We've had such a huge reaction to the archive clips.
Yeah.
We heard from Mick O'Brien, whose mother was on one of them. And we actually we had a big question the other day about a Captain John Munro.
Yes, what happened about that?
So it was wrecking our brains because in all the archives it was listed and he was referred to as Captain John.
Yeah.
But actually his son got in touch and it was actually an admin error at the time. He was never a captain and actually his surname was spelt wrong.
But that was all over the RTE programme.
All over, and his name was actually spelt wrong.
Are you serious?
His surname was misspelled in the archive prints.
Right, now as a producer you'd be very cross over that, wouldn't you?
Well, it's good to know mistakes still happened before technology as well.
Indeed,
so, yeah, it was great to hear. And imagine turning on the radio and you hear that clip. So it's just magic that people know.
So it was a mistake.
It was a mistake made when
but sadly John has passed away, hasn't he?
But it was great to get that because I was looking all over online and I'm a great detective online and I couldn't find a trace of it. So he was actually Mr. John Munro.
Right, but his surname was spelled wrong and he didn't have the rank of captain.
No. So
Isn't that very odd, indeed? Tell me about the toilet seat, for God's sake.
This is an absolutely brilliant one. So there was an unemployed carpenter in 1986 and his name was Paddy Corbett and he was from Coolbawn. So he decided to do a course and set up his own business making wooden toilet seats. So Michael Walsh headed to Coolbawn, chatted to Paddy and also chatted to a very happy customer called Nancy Murphy.
Let's have a listen.
Once upon a time, and if you're over 35, it wasn't really all that long ago, a visit to the little house at the bottom of the garden was part of everyday life. For older members of the family, it was a ritual to be undertaken in a certain way. There was nothing hurried about it. Most people now enjoy indoor plumbing, but in Coolbawn, County Tipperary, an unemployed carpenter, Paddy Corbett, has taken one memento of the past and used it to remove himself from the dole queue. Paddy has turned the old-fashioned wooden toilet seat into an article of high fashion.
The idea first came to me 2 years ago and I put in an antique toilet seat that came from England from an aunt of mine. And I thought, I haven't seen any made here. So I decided I'd make some, but at the time I had no idea how to sell or how to market or anything else.
But you have done a certain amount of market research.
Yes, I've done a Start Your Own Business course in Lean, and it was run by Enco. And there I got all the skills in sales and marketing and research and the financial end of it.
What do you reckon the market is in this country for expensive £35 wooden toilet seats? After all, you can get a plastic one for only £10.
That's true. Through the research, we discovered there's 25,000 new houses being built per year, and there's already 1.5 million houses there, and that's a pretty large market. And all I have to do is try and get 0.3% of that market to make a living.
It's early days yet for Paddy's new business, but he reckons it will give him a respectable income and he can produce customers ready to sing the praises of his product.
Well, I think they're very comfortable, they're warm, they're very well finished. Besides, they're very fashionable at the moment and look very well in my bathroom.
And have you considered the danger of a splinter in an embarrassing place?
No, I never thought about that. But then again, if you consider a plastic toilet seat, if that cracks, you're in trouble. I think the wooden one is more durable.
It's a brilliant piece.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved how quick Nancy was to come
She
up
wasn't having it.
She rebuttal there straight away.
Yeah, she was a loyal customer.
Yeah, and Paddy, do we know anything about Paddy or what happened afterwards? So we'd love to know, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we'd love to know. This was 1986.
Okay.
So we'd love to know if you bought one of the toilet seats off Paddy, if you know what he did next. Did he expand? Did he continue into a different route? And also Nancy, we'd love to know, maybe you knew Nancy, maybe she was your neighbour. We'd love to hear any memories you might have.
Or anybody who got a splinter
from a wooden toilet seat.
You might like to share that with us as well. Amazing reaction to all of these for some. Was RTE kind of obsessed with Tipperary?
It was really strange stuff in
They
Tipperary.
were sending reporters all of the time.
So it seemed to be Michael Walsh a lot.
Yes.
He came down a lot.
Was that Newsbeat?
Newsbeat at the time, yeah. So they seemed to come down for these kind of quirky, regional, local stories like this. So there's such obscure stuff out there that I have some more planned carjackings, robberies, strikes, all different things. And there's so many. So it must make people think, what is going on in Tipperary? Wooden toilet seats on the news. But it's just brilliant. It gives a completely different insight into Tipperary.
Yeah, but I think it's great. I'm not sure would you hear anything like that on RTE, right? I know the Fantastic Nationwide is a wonderful, wonderful programme. But I'm not sure if you'd hear those sort of quirky stuff.
Yeah, it just shows how media kind of has moved on and sometimes forgets about the little unusual things that are going on in smaller areas. And like that, it means so much to so many people because you might know them. You might have heard of them. You might have bought one. It might have been your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, your next door neighbour. These are the stories that really leave an impact.
So let's put it out there. Nancy Murphy, and it was Paddy
Corbett.
Okay, and the wooden toilet seat. So you're looking for people to share memories with you, aren't you?
Yeah, if you have any in particular you remember, even if it was a news report, maybe you did an interview yourself through the decades or something really unusual and newsworthy that happened in your area, like the UFO in Mullinahone, things like that, really unusual, quirky things.
Do you know, I have a complete archive from my very early days in radio with Tip Midwest back in the mid-90s, and I really have to start listening through it because my aunt collected it over the years, and I have to start listening through it because you wouldn't know what would be in
Bring
there.
it in to me, I'll go through it. I'll set up a Fran archive.
All right, thanks for that, Leanne. Thanks very much. If you want to talk to Leanne, it's 1800 938 007.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24 111.
Thanks, Pat. Welcome back to the second hour of Tip Today, 1800 938 007, our free phone number. Martin Brown was on to us to say our prisons are blocked up by generational offenders and the same family names coming up all of the time. John Lunigan has always said that intervention must start at 2 to 3 years of age. If you wait until they're 10 or over in some cases, you have lost them, says Martin. John Lunigan, of course, formerly of Mountjoy Prison and from Bashaman, of course, as well. Fran, our population is growing rapidly. We know we need more housing, bigger schools, bigger hospitals. Does logic not dictate that we also need bigger prisons? This is one of our listeners today. Somebody else feeling we have given enough to Ukraine and charity at this point begins at home. That makes reference to that piece we did earlier on with the Ukraine Civil Society Forum, where they're calling on reverting to the initial 90 days reception period for accommodation of Ukrainian people coming into Ireland. Anyway, text WhatsApp 083 311 3311. Now, children who question their gender are being paid with vouchers to spend in Uber Eats and retailers like John Lewis when taking part in puberty blocker trial backed by the NHS, despite the controversy around the issue and concerns for the health of the participants. Now, it was reported last week that some 226 children who questioned their gender are being incentivised with a promise of up to €500 in vouchers for their part in the experiment, which is set to get underway in April. Now, yesterday, Stormont's Health Minister, Mike Nesbitt, has now suspended Northern Ireland's participating in the trial, a decision that the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has described as disgraceful. Advocate for women's sex-based rights, child safeguarding and fact-based education, Sandra Adams, joins me now. Sandra, good morning to you.
Good morning, Fran.
Good to talk to you again. Just for clarity, Sandra, what exactly are puberty blockers and what effect do they have on young people?
Okay, well, let's start with what puberty is. So puberty is that stage in your life where you move from being a child to becoming an adult. So your brain sends a signal to your pituitary gland that says, right, we need to start producing sex hormones. And then if you're a girl, your ovaries start to produce estrogen, and if you're a boy, your testes start to produce testosterone. And what that does is basically change your body. So you'll have growth spurts, you'll develop breasts or testicles become enlarged, your voice deepens if you're a boy, you menstruate if you're a girl. If you take a blocker, a puberty blocker, it stops that. And we're told that it's a reversible process, but that's not the case, because if you think about it like this, imagine you've got a set of dominoes set up on a table and you push one and the dominoes start to fall over. And if halfway through that process you take out 3 dominoes, the cascade doesn't continue. Now, you can start it again, but you've missed out an entire section. And if that part of puberty is where you had a growth spurt or there was particular bone development, you don't get that back. So puberty blockers interrupt the process of puberty, and there's nothing safe about it.
The Cass report, and I'm sure you're aware of that, Baroness Cass coming up with the report, and several aspects of it are very very worrying indeed. But one of the things she said, the review found that the current evidence base for medical treatments, the ones that we're talking about there, puberty blockers, for under 18s is weak and uncertain, and that services had developed without strong research foundations. So calling for a more cautious and an evidence-led approach. But obviously this evidence isn't there.
Yeah, well, it is remarkable, because if you listen to commentary from either the Conservative government or Labour, both said that there were unacceptable safety risks in prescribing puberty blockers to children. And instead of accepting that at face value, what they've decided to do is to actually test to see whether or not they are actually unsafe when they already know that they're unsafe. It really is a remarkable thing to do. The entire trial seems to be very poorly conceived, because normally in any kind of clinical trial you would have a control group. So you would not be giving them the blockers. But you can't do that with this, because the control group would be children who wouldn't be receiving blockers, and they would go through puberty, so they would know that they weren't receiving them. So why didn't they simply say, instead of spending 10 million on giving children drugs that we already know are harmful, why don't we spend that 10 million euro on a 3-year trial of talk therapy? And we'll see if that helps children accept their bodies, accept them themselves. But they chose not to do that. And even though they're saying, well, while we're giving children puberty blockers that we know are harmful, we're also going to provide psychosocial support, which means therapy. But how will you distinguish whether it's therapy or the blocker that's having the impact of making the child feel better or more accepting of themselves? So the design of the trial is really, really flawed.
Another part of the Cass report that really jumped out at me was that many young people referred to the services had mental health conditions, neurodivergence, or trauma or complex family situations. Now, the report's saying that the care should not focus narrowly on gender identity, but to take a multidisciplinary approach to it, I suppose. But that's very stark, that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it was one of the most, I suppose, the most saddening things about that report, that there are many children who were sent to the main gender clinic in the UK, the Tavistock, and it was clear that they were autistic, that some had experienced physical or sexual abuse, and yet that was overlooked. And I always use this analogy: if you had thousands of children suddenly developing diabetes, we would ask ourselves, why is this happening? What is the underlying reason for this? And that was never really asked, and it's still not being asked.
Why is that, by the way, Sandra? Why do you think we can't have a conversation around this, asking those questions?
I think because it's political and it's ideological. There are some people who truly believe that there is something called the transgender child. And if you're someone like me who does not believe that, doesn't agree with that at all, you will be dismissed as a bigot. as somebody who has no compassion and lacks sympathy, when the opposite is the case. I want to know, why does a child feel the need to literally escape their body? And that's what happens when you put a child on puberty blockers. You're convincing that child that they can physically change so that they are neither male or female. And it's basically because the lobby groups that are pushing this are so incredibly powerful, and they have manipulated politicians' I suppose, good nature, because they have convinced them that if they don't do this, children will be harmed, that children will die by suicide, that children will be deeply unhappy. And that's a very powerful motivator if you're a politician. If someone comes to you and says, you can be at the front of the next human rights campaign, that appeals to ego. Everyone wants to think they're virtuous. And for them, it's a no-brainer. They're just going to do it. They don't consider the profound damage and impact that it actually has on children. Sometimes it's very difficult to make the right choice because you will be unpopular. If you're a parent, you know this. You know what it's like to say no, and the wrath that will incur sometimes at home. But you're in charge. You have to be the one responsible for children. You have to say no. And in this instance, many people who should have been an authority said yes to things that they shouldn't have said yes to.
Were you surprised that First Minister Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill described as disgraceful the decision by Stormont's Health Minister to suspend those trials in Northern Ireland? Were you surprised at her reaction to that?
Unfortunately, I wasn't surprised. I know that Mike Nesbitt sat down with James Estes and Stella O'Malley. James Estes has been at the forefront of protecting children in this domain in the UK. He's formerly a barrister, excuse me, and is a trained psychotherapist. Stella O'Malley is the founder of DEMSECT. I imagine when they sat down with Mike Nesbitt, they explained what I've just explained to you about why puberty is important and what puberty blockers do to children. They destroy bone density. They interfere with brain maturation. They potentially make children sterile. Now, if you're faced with those facts, maybe you then have a moment to pause. If Michelle O'Neill was sat down with them, I wonder if she would also have a moment to pause. I suspect, however, that the fact that Mary Lou MacDonald's brother is a trans-identified male is having a significant impact on the policy around the care of children with identity issues in Sinn Féin.
Well,
David, I think...
Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but I mean, even if it were to be the case, I mean, I'm sure it would have been with compassion that I'm sure that would be her argument for people with these gender issues.
I'm sure compassion can be weaponized, and I think you have to be very, very clear about who are you doing this for? Are you going along with something because it makes you feel good, because you can say, I'm the virtuous person who is compassionate? Or are you doing it because you know it's the right thing for children? And they're very, very different things. And I think a lot of politicians have been lobbied very hard by advocacy groups who are in favour of what's called gender-affirming care, and that's a euphemism. It doesn't affirm their gender. It actually does the opposite. It tells them that they're not the sex they are. And they've been so well lobbied that they basically cannot listen to the other side because they've been told that we are unkind, lacking in compassion and bigoted against people who have identity.
Now, for fear Mike Nesbitt might come out of this as being particularly virtuous, his decision, he said, was because we were on the cusp of an issue developing into another executive row. So I think he was more concerned about the politics around this than maybe the subject.
It's possible, but I imagine if he had sat down with James Estes and Stella O'Malley, he was told in no uncertain terms the truth of what puberty blockers do to children, and that I hope has impacted on his decision. Either way, children in Northern Ireland are being protected from being recruited into a very, very harmful trial.
There's no, well, at least my understanding, Sandra, there's no formal policy banning puberty blockers here in the Republic.
No, well, we're in a very strange situation in this country. The CAS review, which is the biggest review of gender-based medicine, was released in April 2024, and the full report last year. Ken O'Flynn, the independent TD for Cork, has, in a parliamentary question, has found that there has been a review of the CASP by the HSE. There is a full report on that, and it hasn't been published. And that's really concerning, because the CASP review, as you've stated, is very clear about the issues of this type of treatment for children. And the HSE has read it, has reviewed it, but won't tell us what their view of it is. The gender service in this country is based in Loughlinstown, but it is essentially an adult service. And the HSE were sending children from Ireland to the UK for treatment. And to my knowledge, that is not the case
it's
anymore.
Stopped
but
now,
they've
yes.
gone to others.
Yeah.
There is concern that they're being sent to other countries, which is deeply concerning. So the HSE seems to be sitting on the fence and not really coming out and saying what it thinks is the right thing to do.
All right, interesting conversation. We'll see where that gets to. Sandra, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you. And
thank you.
Good
Take
morning
care,
to you. Bye-bye now. That's Sandra Adams speaking to us there, advocate for women's sex-based rights and child self-safeguarding even, and fact-based education. 1800 938 007.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, puck on. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Now, Frank was on and he says, Fran, when dealing with these gurriers, a namby-pamby approach is a waste of time. This is making reference to the young offenders we were talking about earlier on. Frank goes on to say, these brats need a harsh punishment, and so do their feckless parents. It reminds me of Tony Blair in the UK, and he was making out that young troublemakers are misunderstood, and instead we should be hugging the hoodies instead of punishing them. Needless to say, it didn't work. This is Frank to us today on 083 311 3311. Now, a conversation has sparked on social media this week on whether or not our young people will want to come back to Ireland after spending years working abroad. A regular contributor to the show, Angie McGrath from Cashel, joins me now. Angie, good morning to you.
Hi, Fran. How are you?
I'm well, Angie. Lovely to talk to you again. You say there's simply no incentive for young people to stay in Ireland beyond family ties.
There's not really, Fran, if you think about it. The lifestyle, first of all, I mean, even if you can get a house to rent, which is very difficult, the average rent in Tipperary at the moment is 1,600, and I think that's actually probably on the cheaper side. And the average wage is 800 quid a week. So two weeks of your wages just on rent and the other 2 weeks on everything else. So there's no wiggle room for a life at all.
So trying to incentivise people to come back, then, you think, is probably a waste of time, then, according to what you're saying, Angie, is it?
Well, Fran, if you're in, we'll say Australia, that seems to be where a lot of them go. It's expensive to live in Australia. Don't get me wrong, but the wages are good enough to live an expensive lifestyle, and also a lot of the employers in Australia have a lot of incentives for people to want to be there and want to work there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, all right. You also went on to say that people need to be able to afford a social life outside of the work, and that's kind of interesting, because to pay a mortgage now you need two people working flat out, and if they have kids and stuff, there's no question of a social life for an awful lot of them.
I mean, you can, if you were in your 20s now and you're looking at living in Ireland, even if you could get somewhere to live, most of your wages and a couple is just going to go out on the basics, your rent, your food, heat, etc., medical, everything else. And you're looking at maybe going to Australia. They work there in the mines and all this, and they can earn massive money. And the lifestyle there, you have outside lifestyle, loads of things to do, lots of, social life. And when I say social life, I don't mean pubs or anything like that, although obviously that's fine as well. But, an actual life outside of work, a work-life balance, basically.
How did we get to this? Because, we're supposed to be a very wealthy country. But cost of living has gone through the roof. So an awful lot of people out there aren't seeing this wealth.
I think what it is, Fran, is the squeezed middle, as usual.
Yeah.
You literally, just people, your average person living your average lifestyle. There's just, it's fine if you're in a very high income, that's fine. And some of the lower income people are living on a very basic lifestyle because they have to. But if you're out working, two of you working, and you're trying to raise a family, have two cars because you're working in different places, and pay rent or pay a mortgage, sure, you haven't enough for a day out at Tremor on under those circumstances.
Yeah, the other part of what we were talking about was, obliging people who are trained here with the help of taxpayers' money, whether it's in the medical profession or whatever, oblige them to stay here and work for a period of time, Angie. Would you go along with that?
While I'd agree with that, Fran, that's well and good if there was an infrastructure. Because if you are, say, trying to rent somewhere in Dublin, or anywhere really, but if you were, say, you're obliged to work in a hospital in Dublin, the rent is just beyond anyone's means.
Yeah.
That's if you could get somewhere to rent. So by saying that, okay, to try and keep you here, we'll sort of force you to stay here, but not providing any infrastructure for that is just nonsense. Like, there's people, I know of students that are sleeping in their cars in Dublin to go to college because they just can't afford to rent somewhere.
It's incredible. And, where the future is concerned then, you'd wonder about the impact on the future then, Angie.
It's going to have a massive impact on the future, Fran, because people are just not staying here. There's no incentive for them to stay here. They go, and then when you're in another country and you have a lifestyle and you have kids and everything, it's very hard to come back because you're coming back to, what are you coming back to?
Isn't, I don't know, I think it's very sad that we're having this conversation.
Absolutely very sad, Fran. And I love Ireland. As you know, I'm always promoting the local area, promoting everything. I'd only love to see people here, but there needs to be serious questions asked as to how you keep people here. What do you do to keep them here? The government don't seem to be coming up with any answers at all. They're just taxing more, and there's more money to be taken out of people's wage packets. If you're on the average wage, as I said there earlier, 2 weeks of your money just on rent. That's it, and the rest then to pay everything else. And in the meantime, then they're trying to get you to go air to water. They're trying to get you to go to electric cars, but they're not putting anything in place for people to afford that.
I was in Cashel during the... I love your opinion on this as a native of the town, Angie, and I was very disappointed to see the amount of places closed on the main street. Now, I know some of the businesses there, it's a generational thing, but how do people in the town feel about that so many businesses have closed down and they're not being replaced?
To be honest with you, Fran, it's a huge issue. And we had a meeting on Sunday. As you know, I'm in Cllr, Cashel, and we try to put on events for the town. We're a totally voluntary group. So the new Chamber of Commerce in the town are absolutely brilliant, and they're so proactive. And we had a meeting on Sunday whereby a lot of the groups in the town came together to try and put on a festival of events for the town for the summer, to draw footfall into the town for the existing businesses before we lose any more. We had one councillor was there, Councillor Ian Brown attended. He came up with some very good ideas and ways forward, and is there to help for funding, etc., etc. But what we need to do, we need to be proactive. The town is failing, and that anyone with eyes can see that. And it's a real shame. We need participation. We need people to volunteer. We need people to really get behind this initiative.
I was reading on social media that was a positive meeting, though, in a lot of ways, Angie, and it seemed to be, from my reading, because I wasn't there, but from my reading, some young people gave some great input into ideas there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a young chap. He's in a band here in the town, and they're willing to come on board. They're willing to play. They're willing to busk. And according to him, Callum, that there's lots of his friends are just waiting for something to happen so that they can join in. So the will is there. The people are there. We just need to get people behind us. We need to all work together. We need to put egos to the side, and we need to just put Cashel at the forefront and the promotion of the town, and to bring footfall back into the town.
Yeah, I was talking to Councillor Declan Burgess of Cashel as well a little earlier on. We were talking about crime and people living in fear, certainly in rural areas. But is that crime, particularly crime perpetrated by young people, is that an issue in Cashel, Angie?
Do you know, Fran, you often think, we can see the bad side of things, and we can say, crime numbers are up. And I'm not trying to pretend that crimes don't happen. Of course they do. But in general, the youth of Cashel are so good. They're involved in so much. They're in so many clubs and so many. They just need a centralised situation that they can join in. They can put forward stuff. And of course, in any town, you're going to get an element of criminality. At any town, it's not just Cashel. But what we're trying to do is maybe not pretend the negative isn't happening, but try to really build on the positive and build on the youth and getting them to participate and be involved and to promote their town.
Very good. And from that meeting, what else are we going to see?
Well, we're hoping to have events. We'll have a meeting again in 2 weeks, and we're hoping to form a group of, a subgroup really, of 1 or 2 people from each of the individual groups come together, come up with events for the town. We're also hoping through the chamber to have a marquee and some sound equipment and stuff that would be available to all these groups to hold events, so that not one group is trying to afford to have all these things are so expensive. So it would be great to have a sort of a community fund, so to speak, whereby you can borrow these things for your event and maybe collaborate together and have 2 events on one day and stuff like that. Also, the Chamber is trying to, is looking into doing a sort of an overall insurance cover for these events, because as we know ourselves at Cllr, we're crippled with insurance costs. Now, we've been covering them and we've been doing all we can to make sure that's happening, but it is very expensive.
All right,
and it is hard for any group just to, to try and do that. So an overall sort of a collaboration is a brilliant thing for the town.
Well, it is good news to know that it was a positive meeting, and hopefully it will result in a positive outcome.
Very positive. And just to say, Fran, there, if anyone in the town is absolutely and utterly welcome to join, any group is welcome to join. Nobody will be turned away. Anyone from any community background, any of our people in the town who are from different countries, all welcome. Just contact any one of us, contact myself, anyone at all, more than welcome to join. We'd only love to see you coming.
All right, nice one. Thanks for talking to us, Angie. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks very much.
Good morning to you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. That's Angie McGrath speaking to us there. Good morning, Fran, says William in Dail. He says, where in Tipperary is the average wage €800 a week? Will you ever tell the powers that be that the wages outside of the Red Cow are well below €800 that they keep harking on about, says William to us. All right, we'll take a break and then we're back with our psychotherapist, Joannes Berkery.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1-800-938-007. Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puck On. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Join the conversation in Tipperary. Contact us through Facebook, Twitter, or email tiptoday@tipfm.com.
Out driving met 4 different lots of people out walking. Only one group had high vis. Could Fran tell people to wear their high vis? Well, I'm happy to do that, Helen, because I come across it all the time myself. I mean, the whole thing of be safe, be seen is so important. A listener around to say, Fran, at times lower income people have a better net income and lifestyle than those on mid-income wages and working. Some lower income households and social welfare recipients in some cases get grants, payments and many allowances that those working don't qualify for. And lower tax thresholds at times means a higher net income in reality. Example, college grants, school allowances, medical cards, other grants, etc. True, the cost of living is increasing for all. Again, middle class hit constantly. We want our children to emigrate, sadly, says this listener on 083 311 3311. Time now to meet our psychotherapist, Joannes Berkery, who's at our studio in Nina. Good morning to you, Joannes. Let me see. Have we got Joannes? Yes, we have. Good morning to you, Joannes.
Good morning, Fran.
Good to talk to you today.
Yeah.
And
I'm here in your hot seat in Nina.
And you're all alone there and all of that. Well,
no,
look,
I'm not all alone.
Are you not?
I have
Okay.
Paul.
Oh, very good. Well, sure, that's terrific. You're going to talk to us about something that's very close to my heart today, I can tell you. Stress management, Joannes. Is this something you come across all of the time in your practice, that people are stressed?
I think it's something I come across all the time in my life and in everybody's life, because we all have stressors and we all have traumas, but it's how we deal with them. And there's a lovely idea about the window of tolerance for stress and for trauma and for heightened situations. So you have your window of tolerance where you can regulate yourself, and you can be reactive, but you come back into your centre and into your balance much quicker. But what happens is, with stresses that aren't being dealt with and where there is no self-care and no self-management or self-awareness, people will go into 2 states, and one is kind of a hyper state of reactivity or arousal, which is that fight and flight, and there's a lot of reactivity there. Or they'll go into the state of collapse, which is the freeze state, and they've no motivation and they're despondent and depression sets in. So you have this window in the centre, and you have these 2 states, hyper reactivity or hypo reactivity in the collapse. And it's finding how you can support your own window of tolerance and how you can expand that so that you're not going into these extreme reactive places.
How much of it, Joannes, is a personality thing? I mean, some of us are natural worriers, and we might spend the majority of our life stressed. I know that in my own case, if I have nothing to worry about, I'll worry about somebody else's stuff, if you know what I mean. You know, so some of us live in that kind of world of stress because of our personalities.
And we always can change. And if it's not serving you well, then you can change that pattern. You know, we are in the Chinese New Year. It's a great time for change. It's a great time for developing self-awareness. A lot of times when we have what you say an anxious personality, usually there's developmental trauma or developmental stress in our lives. So when we were born into a stressful environment, or our primary caregivers weren't available to us, and we learned to be on alert and to be stressed. And that can be resolved, and resolved well actually, by working on bringing yourself back into that window of tolerance.
So how can we do that?
Well, if you're in let's say the hyper reactivity, in that fight or flight, anything that will ground you, whatever, and for me it's one thing and for you it's another, but breath work is great there. Anything that grounds you and brings you back to centre, walking away rather than getting into the reactivity of give me a minute here please, and say no and move, and getting yourself out of the situation rather than impulsively. It's a very impulsive place, that hyperactivity place. And with the hypo, then you need to set yourself small challenges and get them done. Like, it may be we've no toilet paper in the house, I need to go out and I need to do a shop, and motivate yourself to come out of that freeze state, or make eye contact with somebody when you're at the grocery store. It can be, that place can be very, very isolating. The hypo freeze collapse state can be very isolating for people, and they feel very shut off and on their own.
Yeah, and of course, fear then plays into this, Joannes, doesn't it? I mean, you know, sometimes people who are anxious and stressed, we're afraid.
We're afraid, and we're afraid of the anxiety itself,
Yeah,
because we feel we have no, like, a lot of times people who come to me after having a panic attack about something, you know, that warranted a panic attack, but then they get panicked and anxious about ever having another panic attack and not being in control and not being in charge. And that's why I'm saying, with self-awareness and self-development, you can expand that window of tolerance and go, yeah, that's what happened, and beforehand I was really tired and I had overextended myself and I reacted in that way. So you learn about yourself.
It's fantastic. And would you have seen people change, you know, and able to get rid of this, or deal, I suppose, with these stressful situations?
I think once you get, like, sorry, I think once you get that idea of the window of tolerance and your hyper reactivity and your hypo, even like Google it, search it, you know, do it on YouTube, and you see it, you'll start, it's about learning about yourself, and it's about taking charge of your own life and your own responses to stressors.
If you don't, what happens then?
If you don't, then you get into that continuous fight or flight state where you burn out really quickly. Your relationships suffer, your health suffers, because you're always in that go, 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 and hyper-vigilant, hypersensitive state. Or if you're in the hypo, it can lead to very deep depression, deep isolation, self-esteem gone. So in either way, if you don't kind of come back into that middle ground of balance, then there is huge consequences if this, and we all get, like, I get into a hyperactivity state if something happens, or, you know.
Yeah.
But it's how quickly I can recover. It's how quickly I can come back to myself and go, to hell with it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say this plays into depression, for example.
Yeah, if you think of the hypo reactivity, where it's kind of like blank. You disconnect from yourself, you're in a frozen state, and there's a hopelessness and a helplessness, and that'll roll into depression if it isn't dealt with. So oftentimes I would say to people, get a pattern going, get a pattern of daily living going, like what time do you get up at the same time, and have routines, and pull yourself out of that. It's a harder one to do. I think you really do need professional help for that. And the other thing I would recommend is Aware are really good. They've meetings in nearly every town in Ireland, and they also work on bringing yourself out of that place, of that hypo collapsed, mentally collapsed place. You might be physically fine, but mental.
Yeah, stress, as I see it, Joannes, is, you know, it's this series of thoughts about the possibility of what can go wrong in the future, I guess. And if we allow, well, I know in my case, if I allowed that to start, it spirals into, like, you know, not being able to sleep and being miserable and a pain in the ass to those around me as well. Is that how you view it? This series of thoughts that's almost out of control in some sort of a way?
You're living in the what if. What if this happens, and what if that happens?
And it's always the worst case scenario that we come up with,
It's always the worst case scenario. And sometimes I would get, journaling really helps. So if I would get somebody to write down the worst case scenario, let's say about an upcoming wedding or an upcoming funeral or an upcoming family gathering, and write down, what if Joe gets drunk, and then Patrick, gets cross, and then he loses his temper and a fight breaks out and what'll blah blah blah, and then read it afterwards and see how much of it was accurate. Sometimes that kind of black on white helps to see it written. The other thing that also works is I encourage people to get stickies and write it and put it in the car and put it on the mirror. What if it all works out?
Yes.
What if it all works out? Because you see, being anxious and being always looking for that hypervigilance of the worst case scenario, that's a habitual way of being. Like, let's say for you, Fran, it's a habitual way of being. You're always looking out because clearly something happened sometime that was a shock to you or a trauma to you that you haven't dealt with. But if you can keep saying, what if it all works out?
Yeah.
What if it all works out?
That's a wonderful piece of advice. I mean, it's very simple, but that's a wonderful piece of advice.
It just cuts through that habitual way of, oh my God, what if I miss the plane? What if I don't succeed? What if I fail that exam? What if I start stuttering? All these things. And then what if it all works out?
It's a great notion indeed. And just for clarity for people out there who might be worriers and might be anxious and it might be destructive to their life and to their relationship, you have seen people change their life around with this, Joannes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course, yeah. Sometimes when you ask me that question, Fran, I go, of course, yeah, that's my work. Yeah, people don't have to be in this hypervigilance state.
Yeah, and the only reason I always ask you that is that I think that's fantastic for people to hear, Joannes, because sometimes we're in this spiral and we think it's just us. That's the way we are, and we'll continue trundling through life, and we're going to be stressful warriors.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It becomes a habitual way of being, and then it feels like it's innate in you and it's part of your personality. But I really guarantee if people listening, and you, what if it all works out? Print it out on a piece of paper and have it as your screensaver, take a photograph of it, and you look at your phone, you go, what if it all works out? And you're cutting through that cycle, that repetitive cycle of anxiety.
Well, if people want help with anxiety and worrying and all of that, I'm sure they'd love to talk to you. How can they do that, Joannes?
They can call 086 338 3398 or go on my website, selfdiscovery.ie.
All right, well, great to talk to you today. And thanks, as always, Joannes. Thank you and good morning to you. And that's Joannes Berkery there, who is our psychotherapist. Leanne is with me in studio. Morning to you, Leanne.
Good morning, Fran.
What else have you got for us, Leanne?
We have another clip for you because we've had such a great reaction to the last few we have. So I won on the Clonmel development scheme in the 80s and the reaction at the time to the scheme and what people thought of it.
All right, let's have a listen to this.
According to Labour Exchange figures, there are almost 1,700 people unemployed in Clonmel. Of those, 600, over a third, are under 25. That situation prompted the Chamber of Commerce to set up their Employment Enterprise project. Funded by ANCO, it now employs 11 young people on a short-time basis.
We're trying to create jobs in Clonmel. That's essentially what we're trying to do. We're also trying to train young people. We feel that in the 80s, people are going to have to find their own opportunities, and we feel market research is going to be terribly important in the 80s. So young people will go out and research. We hope that jobs will follow from that research, but they'll also know how to go about helping themselves and finding out opportunities in the market. And that's essentially what we feel young people will have to do in the 80s. The jobs which existed, we'll say, in the public sector area, and they were advertised in the paper, we'll say, they just don't exist anymore. So it's a question of self-help. We're all about self-help. That's essentially our role.
In the immediate future, there'll be 16 people working for Employment Enterprise. They were all previously unemployed. Now they have jobs until
Hello, good
May.
afternoon. My name is David Barrett. We're involved with the Employment Enterprise Centre here in Clonmel, and we're doing some research at the moment on products which are being imported, which could be substituted here in Ireland. Do you mind if we actually survey some of the shop space here that you have?
Sure, no.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Okay.
They're working as researchers, contacting local industries and shops to find products that are imported but which could possibly be produced locally.
Well, I think it's a very good idea because the initiative now is in our own hands. It's up to ourselves to generate our own employment if possible and to help others do it as well. I think we've been dependent for too long on state agencies to provide the jobs. And at a local level here in Clonmel, we can try and help ourselves now at this stage.
Although I have the weaving skills, I don't actually know how to go out and sell my products, enough so to keep me in business, we say all the time. So, they're helping me now get the contacts and also how to actually, sell.
The people involved in employment enterprise believe they're taking a novel and correct approach to job creation. They hope the project will be followed by a start your own business course, a course that they'll go into with products, ideas and markets already established.
Often those start your own business programs don't really have the ideas to start with, but here we're trying to start with the ideas. What does the market want? Work back from that, find then the people who can produce.
The success or otherwise of the project will depend on the people and on the businesses of Clonmel. The researchers are looking for cooperation in the first instance with their survey. And later, of course, new businesses can only be set up if a local market has been established.
The average consumer is not really convinced of the importance of buying locally and buying Irish. And this is what we're about, that we feel that if we can encourage our local housewife to buy local products, she will in turn buy Irish products and so forth, and in that way give employment. You're really down to a situation, do we really want jobs for our children? And if we do, we have to make sacrifices. We have to really mean it when we go into a shop and find out if this is a local product or if this is an Irish product. If we don't, unemployment will still be with us.
It's perhaps unusual for a Chamber of Commerce to get involved directly in job creation. However, the Chamber members in Clonmel believe that this sort of thing will have to happen more and more in the future if the problem of youth unemployment is to be tackled.
Isn't it interesting now? Some of the issues there are issues that we're dealing with now, I suppose.
Trying to promote local business, trying to educate people on how to get out there. And I have to thank, we had this sent in from a Tom M.
Okay.
So that's, he
sent you the clip.
He sent me the clip of this one. So that was all the detail I got. Thanks to Tom M for that one. But yeah, it's, again, like we said earlier this week, it's like listening to now. You could have that conversation trying to promote tourism, local business, weaving. I love that when the lady's trying to set up a weaving business.
That's great. Now, of course, after that, then you had all the tech industry coming into Clonmel. But again, a lot of concerns there about the future, about future generations. So, I mean, and this plays into conversations that we've been having this morning.
Exactly. And even the clip we played in the first hour of the show, it was happening in North Tip and in South Tip at the same time, around the same era. The exact same struggles were being faced by local people.
Very good. Now, like Tom M, if people want to send you in clips or if they want to advise you on pieces that might be up there on the internet, we'd be
let me know, because this was a little gem. So big thanks to Tom for this one. And if you've any more gems you're holding on to, let me know.
All right, thanks for that, Leanne. You can speak to Leanne 1800 938 007.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24 111.
Thanks, Pat. Welcome along to the final hour of Tip Today. One of our listeners is very grateful to Helen for bringing up the issue of people out walking and cycling without high vis. Brian is the prophet of doom this morning. He says, from your various conversations, Fran, on the cost of living crisis, fundraising for essential services, people leaving the country in droves, it has all the symptoms of a country being in the midst of a recession. But our government is shelling out money to other countries and NGOs like there's no bottom to the purse. But mark my words, the recession is just around the corner, and I dread what the people who are stretched now will have to endure, says Brian. And that's into us on 083 311 3311. Now, earlier this week, Leanne spoke to us about how last year bar sales at Leinster House rose by 34% to nearly €445,000. Current and former TDs and senators enjoyed shots of tequila and sambuca, along with €27 servings of premium whiskey, can you believe? Now, throughout the year, politicians accumulated nearly €60,000 in expenses at the Parliament's two pubs, the Visitors' Bar and the Members' Bar, which are reserved exclusively for current and former members of the Oireachtas. Now, a huge reaction to this on the show, as you can imagine, and I'm joined now by regular contributor to the show, Hughie O'Donnell. Good morning to you, Hughie.
Good morning, Fran, and good morning to all your listeners there on your show, Tipp Today, and from a damp, miserable, wet Cllr Declan, but I'm here to bring the sunshine, he said, hopefully.
Well, I'm looking forward to you bringing sunshine. I'm not sure how well developed your palate is, Hughie, but have you tasted €27 servings of premium whiskey? I haven't.
Well, you know what, I haven't, but I saw a lad above in Galway once upon a time, and I thought he was a great lad. I think it was Middleton whiskey. It's a very special one. It was the top end. And he went to pay for a round of drink with his mates. There was only about 8 of them for the whiskey, and the card was refused, so he had to have a whip around. I think the round came to something like €2,000.
Wow.
And it was the premium stuff. It was the top. It was the Middleton. It was the top. And it was clearly signed. I could see it, and I said, "This man is,
off his head.
He's reaching for the stars here." But no, he had to get a whip around off his buddies because he didn't have enough in his card.
Isn't it? Well, that's our politicians pale into insignificance then in terms of what they've spent. But what do you make of that spend in the Dail bars?
Look, I've looked at the prices there. Let's say in relation to down here in Dublin. Like there are points, let's say at 2026 prices, it's anywhere between $5.20 and $6.20 for a pint, let's say, in the Dail bar. Small one, let's say, is $4.90, $5.50. So in relation to Dublin, let's say it's probably it's okay. It's low. It is balling low. Down here, let's say it's average, But in relation to, let's say, it's extravagant. It's an elitist. It's a setting that they have. It's a luxury that they have a Dail bar in your place of work. Let's be honest. Let's say I couldn't have a bar where I am. But they're crunching those numbers, all right. Look, let's be honest. It is look, I don't mind saying this, but it's a stressful job. It is a stressful job. I know they have a lot of people that they have employees, they have staff, and look, they're only human at the end of the day. But those prices, all right. When you look at, let's say, some of the higher ends, and you've just quoted that figure there, you'll be kind of saying to yourself, lads, maybe you need to tighten it up there ever so slightly, you know what I mean?
And what about the bigger conversation, Hughie, of having bars in the Dail, in terms of the example being set? Does that concern you at all?
Well, here, I'm going to come from a Hughie O'Donnell angle, right? I know former TDs, sitting TDs, I know former councillors and sitting councillors. I myself, let's say, I like to go out and about. So, there's the human aspect as well, let's say. They work, right? So that they work. But you've had them on your show when the mics are down, they're only human beings. Yeah. I'm coming from a health and safety point of view. What do I mean by that, health and safety? They're very safe within the Dail bar. I know, just hear me out. They're safe in the Dail bar. They go in there. They've done their day's work. I'd like to think they don't go in there till late at night, let's say, and they have an apartment, that they have a place that they can stay, or a friend's house they can stay, and this is their downtime. For health and safety, a lot of them, they can't go into, not that they can't, but they won't go into certain places and have a drink with their partner, with their children, with their family, because they're going to get absolutely ear-bashed out of it. So look, I think it's a safe environment for them, a health and safety point of view, that they do have the Dail bar. It's there since 1922. There's a precedent been set. They're going to go to his hotel for, we're paying for the drink, we're paying for the bar, we're paying for their privilege. But they can go to his hotel, they can go to Mulcahy's in Clonmel, they can go to the Shamrock Lounge, they can go wherever they want, the Horse and Jockey, but I think it's the best place for them. It is the best place. So
you don't have a problem with that. I was looking, I love to eat out, and I was making a comparison because I was looking at the prices of the food, for example, available to them in the Dail. And by comparison to the general costs, if you're eating out outside of the Dail, it's pretty cheap. I mean,
I didn't look into that now. I came from the alcohol point of view. I can only quote those figures.
Yeah,
in relation to food, look, I'm sure. Look, I'm sure they're well looked after, their accommodation in that regard as well. But across the board, let's say the prices, let's say what they are paying for drink up there, down here it's more or less the same. But up in Dublin, let's say if you were to go to, let's say, the Temple Bar area, they're doing really, really well. You know, that kind of a way.
I suppose, but because the food was so reasonable, I had a look at it, Hughie, and it's not subsidised. But the fact that the restaurant or the utility and the overhead costs are covered as part of the whole parliamentary complex that is the Dáil, it means that they can keep the prices lower than typical pubs and restaurants, you know.
Right, well, yeah, well, maybe let's say it's something that maybe really needs to be addressed and looked at. Like, I know that there's a visitors bar and then there's a members bar. No, I've never been. I've been invited, I've never gone. I think I'd like to have a look and have a nose, because I'm paying for this. I'm paying for it, you're paying for it, we're all paying for it. I would, curiosity, I would like to have a look, but it's a visitors bar, but there's a members bar.
Yes.
You know, that's the one I'd like to get inside the door. I'd say there's some serious wheeling and dealing and going on there. But I would, for curiosity's sake, like, I've been in a few chambers, I've been in Cork chambers, I've been in Tipperary chambers, but that up there, I'd be curious. But let's say, they'll claim, look, they're claiming left, right and centre, they're claiming all their expenses and everything as well. So I don't know where the buck stops, but I'm sure when it comes to food, you've done your homework. Yeah, they're being well accommodated there as well.
Yeah, and it's all up there if people want to have a look at the kind of prices on the menu there. We also asked you to have a look at the whole vaping thing for us, because Temperance Sunday took place last Sunday, and now vaping is being included in the pledging. What do you make of that, Hughie?
Well, vaping itself, look, I'm not going to throw my daughters underneath the bus, but I'm trying to have conversations with them, and one of their boyfriends has gone cold turkey, and fair play to them. I'm vaping for me is, and I don't mean to knock any businesses. I know you have a gentleman on there now and again, and that's his business, vaping. But for me, putting the likes of that, it's kind of a doji, let's say, for adults.
A doji for adults.
It is. It's a doji for adults.
That's very funny.
I tell you what I did one day. I tidy towns here in Cllr. I picked up two of them, the disposable ones. One the size. I have to slow down. I do apologise. One the size of a Tic Tac packet, and one quite substantially bigger. Like, these are disposable ones.
Yes.
Took them home. Took my 4 hammer to them, and I battered them around the place. Now, I recorded this. It's up there on my socials. What I saw inside of it, mother of God, between batteries and wires and gunk and everything, I was saying to myself, you're ingesting that, like, you're putting that into your system. I'm not a vapor. I see people. I am aware of addiction. Don't get me wrong. Addiction's addiction, and it's a huge conversation there. But when it comes to these vaping things, they're a horrible thing altogether. And I was shocked to say when I saw let's say the mechanics of them as well, like, you know.
It's incredible. Yeah. And that notion of a pledge and rewording a pledge now, you know, that includes cigarettes and vaping and illegal drugs and the like. Do you think the pledge has a part to play in our 2026 lives?
I don't know. Look, I'm on the fence on that one. I'm going to say I put on my political hat.
Yeah.
I'm on the fence on that one. I don't know. Look, you could tease it out a bit more. It is definitely something up for debate, something like that. But it's a bit of a grey area, all right.
But you wouldn't object to? Is that what I'm getting from you, Hughie? You wouldn't fully object to the notion of a pledge, would you?
I wouldn't. I'd be kind of warming towards it, all right. But I kind of have to tease it out a bit more. You know, I would certainly have to tease it out a bit more.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. But do you think it would mean anything to younger people nowadays? That notion of, you know, a confirmation pledge that we would have had back in the day.
Yeah. Well, now that you mentioned it, it's my oldest. Sorry, not my oldest. My youngest daughter. Like, she's actually having her confirmation on March 7th here in Cllr. So I haven't really sat down and have a chat with her about it, but I know it's on the cards. I would encourage her, let's say, because she's still a young child, even though she's 12 going on 27, thanks to her older sisters. But, like, she knows it all. But I would encourage, look, time is precious, let's say, and I have encouraged her, look, she'll probably get a mobile phone, she'll start up maybe a social media account, and I say when it comes to the pledge like that, I would encourage her, let's say, listen, and I always tell the girls here as well, like, look, don't do drugs, have a drink, don't stay away from it. I'd encourage them, because I'm a father figure. I mightn't be a great father figure, but I'm a father figure to them, and I'll always be a father figure to them. But I've always encouraged them, look, we introduced them to drink. Look, if you want to have a drink, have a drink. We've encouraged that. Look, if you want to, nothing else. But with Brona, let's say my youngest princess, I would say, look, we look after you as best we can, and look, I would encourage her not to have a drink. Don't mind what your friends are doing, don't mind that, and we'll look after you. And in relation to, say, vaping and things like that, and stuff you're putting into your system, I'd say, look, we'll just have a chat about it, and we'll try and put the wing around you, put the arm around you, like, we'll show you the way, the good, the good, bad, and the indifferent. But when it comes to the likes of that vaping and all the bits and pieces, no, they wouldn't do anything. If they did something for you, if there was a positive thing, I'd be all for it, but for me, no, not really.
Would it be positive? Because a couple of people came on to me there when we first discussed this. Was it last year? I think it was. Who, in fairness, they said we were very heavy smokers. We started to vape. It got us off the cigarettes.
Yeah, I work with a guy, let's say, and big smoker, right? Big smoker, and I was nearly going to put on an accent there. Let's say he's not Irish. I won't put on the accent. I won't disrespect him. I won't disrespect anyone else. But he said, Hughie, I was a heavy smoker, and now I feel so much better. I have so much energy. And why is that? I'm vaping. But the thing here, I tell you, look at the exercise itself. If you're smoking a cigarette, what have you got to do? You've got to open up the pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
It's
a physical sort of a thing.
With a vape, out of the pocket, dirty into the mouth, stuck away like a little sucky calf, right? And you know what I mean? But you're vaping more than you were smoking. You're constant. Now, okay, in work capacity, and you're on our own as well. You're not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to vape. But you're like, but it's so out and about, so easy. It's too easy to take the vape out of your pocket and start stucking away in it. Like, I think possibly, I don't know. Let's say I can only go on my buddy, my mate. If Dad was alive, God be good to him, he used to smoke 60 cigarettes a day, and he was yellow in confirmation, communion photographs. I'm not speaking ill of the dead, but that was Dad, and Dad had an addiction, let's say, when it came to cigarettes. But these vaping things, they're too bloody handy to take them out and start sucking away in them.
Well, that's for sure. Do you know, when I was talking to you about the meals in the Dail bar, I had lost my notes, but I found them again. Evening main course, including steak, €20.50.
What?
€20.50, and that's actually increased by €2.50, so to €20. And a lamb rump, $18.50. I mean, come on, you know yourself, Hughie. At this day, you pay €30.
I'm coming into you there. where you're working. I'm hopping in the passenger seat of your car, and we're going to the Dail.
We're going to the. Yeah.
Because I know. I'm not going to mention the place, but it's a place here in Cllr, and it does a stunning steak. It's probably one of the best. I know people that say they dine out, and they say it's one of the best in the country. And the gentleman there, and he does a steak. Sure, you're up over €30 for the steak.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a good price. That's a good.
No, there's different sizes, there's different cuts and everything. Here, I'm definitely looking to go to the Dail now to have a few pints of Guinness and a bit of steak, and you're coming with me.
What? I'll take you up on that. A gourmet beef burger went from €12 to €15, and a Caesar salad from €9 to €11.50. So you can get a Caesar salad for €11.50.
I'm looking at one or two of them now, and I'm not being disrespectful, but a few of them are after putting on a bit of condition there now in the last 12 months. I am genuine.
You're not going to fat shame anybody now, are you?
Hey, no, I'm not. No. But there's one gentleman in particular.
Stop that now.
And I'd say now he's after going from a 14.5-inch neck up to a 16.5-inch neck.
And what do you say to me now? You can understand it, is it?
Honestly, God, I can. You wouldn't. Hey, listen, I bring a packed lunch into work. I bring a dinner when I'm on evenings, which I'm going into now. Yeah. And we've had the use of a canteen. But I'm telling you, to be fair, hard now to work off a few pints of Guinness and a steak dinner there for getting that every day. I'm telling you, you'll be putting on the bit of condition, all right.
Hughie, great to talk to you. Look after yourself. Enjoy your lunch, by the way.
I will indeed. I don't know what it is, but sure, all donations are great to be received. Fran, Corey, take care. God bless you. I'll talk to you.
Thanks, Hughie. Thank you. Bye-bye to now. Hughie O'Donnell, the great Hughie O'Donnell there from Cllr. I was in the Dail bar once, and it was Noel Coonan. Noel Coonan brought me up and looked after me, and we had a great old time, and we did have a pint or two, but that's a long time ago. We'll take a break, back in just a moment.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long-wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tip FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
As you know, this week we're giving away an overnight stay for two at the Talbot Hotel to highlight the wedding extravaganza weekend that's happening this weekend. To tell us more about what you can expect at the Talbot this weekend, glad to be joined in the studio by Sales and Marketing Manager for the Talbot. Laura Jones is with me. Good morning to you, Laura.
Good morning, Fran. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Lovely to see you today. Before we talk about this, can we talk about Valentine's? Because I know you had a very successful Valentine's.
Yeah, it's the season of love. I suppose Valentine's isn't about chocolates and flowers anymore. It's quite a busy time for proposals.
Yeah.
So they say 1 in 15 couples get engaged around Valentine's, and we had one in the hotel on Saturday night, so it was fabulous.
Must have been brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's great excitement. It was a very low-key proposal, but it was lovely to be in a secret, and then to be there to celebrate with the couple afterwards. So it was exciting. It was lovely.
Many congratulations to them indeed. So tell me about what's happening this weekend, because it's it's an unusual event, isn't it? Because it's a combination of events.
It is. So we've teamed it our wedding extravaganza weekend. So we're delighted to be collaborating with My Dress Bridal in Carrick-on-Shore, which is a fantastic wedding dress shop if anyone knows of it. And so we've teamed together. So we've a full dedicated weekend to weddings. So it's all about inspiration, wedding inspiration. So on Saturday we start at 11 until 4, and on Sunday it's 10 till 4. So what you can expect is we're inviting anybody who's thinking of getting married or who's recently engaged to call into the hotel. So it's on in the Talbot Hotel, and one part of the day will be a pop-up wedding dress bridal sale with My Dress Bridal. So one part of the hotel will have that, and then another part of the hotel then will have the showcase. So we'll be showcasing our award-winning wedding facilities within the hotel as well. So it's just a perfect opportunity to come in and speak with both teams from the wedding dress side of things or the hotel side of things, and have a look around, see what the trends are, and it'll be only ourselves there. So it's not as if you're going to be flooded with other exhibitors.
Right.
So it's lovely time, and you'll have plenty of time to talk to us all.
Which is nice. You can deal holistically with the entire wedding, can you not? Because you
Absolutely.
have an area for the ceremony as well.
That's it, yeah. And the trends are moving away from the traditional church weddings to civil or humanistic wedding celebrations. And if you pop in on Saturday or Sunday, no matter what size your wedding is, we'll be able to show you. We have a room dedicated as set up for a civil wedding, and we can talk you through the different sizes and what works. So it's lovely. It's becoming more popular now that people are doing the ceremony in the hotel. And we would be probably one of the most popular hotels in Tipperary for the civil weddings. So it's good to see it.
A big plus for you is that fantastic function room, of course, isn't it?
It's great, yeah. And it was refurbished a couple of years ago, but it's very functional. So if we've got a big wedding, for example, there's so much space inside there, and it's a fine big bar as well. So and the modern decor, it's lovely inside there when it's all dressed up. But you'll see that anybody who pops in on Saturday and Sunday will see the lovely candelabras and the floral displays and things like that as well.
So you'll be totally set up?
Totally set up, and it'll be blank. There'll be no people, there'll be no guests, no bride and groom.
But all set up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And where the ceremony is concerned, can you advise people as well? Because I'm sure people aren't always entirely sure about how that ceremony works or who should perform the ceremony.
I suppose we've done so many weddings in the hotel, so we'd call ourselves experts at this stage. Yes, we can, and we can go through the rules and regulations, the governmental rules and regulations as well, and we can advise them of all that. It is very daunting starting off, not knowing where to start, but I suppose that's why we're there. We hold every couple's hands through the entire process, from inquiry right through who to speak to, who to get in contact with, regarding getting their green book and all that kind of thing. So and we're there. So I suppose we start off not really knowing the couple, and then through the process it's kind of sad seeing the couples getting married and they're gone then, because we don't deal with them anymore then after that, and it can be up to an 18-month process from the time of inquiry. Some are shorter and some are longer, but the average would be about 18 months that we're dealing with couples, and we're getting emails all times of the day and night and everything, and answering all their questions. We know their families, their top table, so it's lovely. It's really exciting for us,
isn't it? Indeed. Food has to be the big thing though, hasn't it?
Big time, yeah. So, and I always say to couples, most people will always remember the food and the entertainment.
Yeah.
And I always feel, and you know that from the entertainment side of things, you know, that you shouldn't scrimp and save on, you know, and that. And so it's lovely just to sit down, and when we kind of get a feel for the couple as we're talking to them through the process, we kind of get an idea what they like and what their family is like as well. So we advise them on that and the different. And like, we try to work with a lot of the Tipperary food producers, as in, you know, like we're trying to, our menus, our chef would have local menus, you know what I mean, our local sourced foods for the menus and that, which works really, really well. And so it's great. And then like we'd invite them in then for tastings, you know, as well, so that they can come in.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
right,
so that would be like a couple would be invited in if they're getting married with us to have their tasting. And if they're undecided what main course to have, we tell them try on the night 2 or 3, you know, main courses or 4 main courses, and then whittle it down then to what they want on the day to appear on their menu.
Are there trends where wedding food is concerned? Because I know one that I was at in recent times, bacon and cabbage was on the menu, for example. Are there trends all the time, you know?
There tends to be, I suppose, look, in Tipperary, I'll always say, you know, most of our wedding couples like a good traditional meal, and you're trying to please. I mean, the average wedding is anything kind of from 140, 150, you know. So you're trying to please 140, 150 people. So we'd always kind of say, if you want to try a little bit, you know, be a little bit more adventurous or have something different on the menu, go with one menu item that is a little bit adventurous, but then have a safe option as well, just to give people the option, you know what I mean. And like your starter choices and main course, there's always a choice there as well. So but trend wise, we're seeing a lot of people looking at the sustainability side of things for weddings at the moment as well. So just trying to be a bit more mindful, I suppose, of the environment, what they're providing on the day, you know, wastage, you know, and things like that as well. So that's one thing to watch for the future.
Now, the My Dress bridal wear aspect to this as well, of course, a wonderful shop in Carrick-on-Shore. They'll host a sort of a pop-up shop in a lot of ways. It's a pop-up shop, yeah. So for any brides out there that are definitely thinking of looking at dresses, you don't need an appointment. You can just pop up to the girls on the day. They'll have a large showroom in one of our meeting rooms set up, and there'll be dedicated changing facilities there as well that they can privately try on dresses of that. Yes.
They have a fantastic range of designer dresses. I was chatting to Lynn there earlier in the week, and I wish I was getting married myself. It sounds really exciting what she's got on offer, but they're beautiful dresses from all sizes, from sizes 10 up to size 20, and the designer dresses there, starting point is 500, but I mean, anybody out there who's been looking at wedding dresses will know that, I mean, the average cost is about 1,400-1,600 for a wedding dress. So there's great savings to be made on designer gowns. So
it's a great opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
Where
absolutely.
That is concerned. It's a lovely idea. Fair
Brilliant.
play.
Yeah, we're looking forward to welcoming all the couples now, so I hope we'll be busy.
Yeah, I'm sure you will indeed. So you don't need to register or anything, just turn up
and we'll be there. So if it's one aspect you only want to see dresses, you can pop down to Lynn and the girls from My Dress Bridal, and if you're interested in even looking at the civil ceremony side of things, it doesn't matter what size your wedding is, whether it's 10 people to 150 or 200 people, we'll be able to meet the couples, show them what the different rooms we can offer, because we can do all weddings, all shapes and sizes as such, so we can show them the facilities as well, and our beautiful bridal suite as well. So.
Mary Madden from Nina is our finalist for today in the competition.
Congratulations, Mary.
Is huge, by the way. We're getting a huge reaction to it. What about business in general? How's it going for you? How is it looking into the summer?
It's, you know, I suppose Clonmel, we've so much going for it, and in the county. And I had a meeting this morning with Falch Ireland, and we're very active members of Tipperary Tourism. They're always flying the flag for Tipperary, and there's so many fantastic offerings out there for families, and we're in midterm break this week as well, so it's great. It's great. We keep forgetting that we're, you know, with the Office of Public Works, with so many beautiful buildings locally to us, Tipperary Museum and everything of hidden history. There's so much around us, so it's great that we have that leisure element with families and that. But apart from that, we're so busy with concerts and events at the moment as well. So
isn't it great? You have famous faces turning up there. Did I see? Was it Bob Geldof?
You'd never know who you'd find at the Talbot. So you pop in every now and again as well, Fran.
There you go. Me and Bob. Me and Sir Bob. You can't beat it. Have a wonderful weekend. I know it's going to be tremendous.
We're really looking forward to it.
Always good to see you.
Yeah. Thank you, Fran. Thank you so much.
Laura Jones there. Laura is Sales and Marketing Manager at the Talbot.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1-800-938-007.
Now, we were speaking with Leanne earlier on, and we were speaking about the development of the wooden toilet seat in Anina. Well, delighted to hear from a gentleman who says, delighted to hear you talk about my brother Paddy Corbett of Coolbawn and about his toilet seats. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2014. Isn't that very sad news? And we'd love to find out more about that, because a lot of people are intrigued by that piece this morning. But thank you very much indeed for getting in touch with us on 1800 938 007. Now it's time to continue on with our series, The History of Ireland, with John G. O'Dwyer. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Fran.
Good to see you today. Ireland, the 17th century. And, I mean, a period of enormous change over that 100 years.
Absolutely, enormous change. There's no doubt about that. What you had then is the last time we stopped, we were at the defeat of the Irish and the Spanish at the Battle of Kinsale.
Yes.
So at that stage then, O'Neill and O'Donnell returned forlornly to Ulster. Now, what would have happened then? Mountjoy, who was the Lord Deputy in Ireland, you would generally expect then he would attack their territory, which he did. He laid waste to Ulster and he caused a famine. But now, in the meantime, then, there was still a huge army in Ireland, and Queen Elizabeth wasn't too happy with that. Goodness, the expenditure of keeping this, she wanted peace. And she was afraid that O'Neill and O'Donnell would fight a guerrilla war in Ulster and keep a huge army tied down, which she couldn't afford. She was almost at the end of her life then. She wanted out, and she ordered Mountjoy to negotiate. And so you got the Treaty of Mellifont. Extraordinarily, a pardon for O'Neill and O'Donnell. They were allowed to keep on their Catholic faith. They were allowed to keep their lands, the titles Earls of Tyrone, but they had to submit to the English crown. They had to use the English language and English law. It seemed a very good treaty for them.
Where did that go wrong? Because they ended up leaving the country then.
All about to go wrong, and this is one of the things. Communication isn't great in the 17th century. So, you know, the Queen is over there, and then King James, they might have their ideas, but what will the people on the ground? And the new deputy in Ireland, Governor of Ireland for the British, was a fellow called Arthur Chichester, and he disliked O'Neill and O'Donnell immensely. So even though the Queen might think one thing, he kept harassing them, inciting local lords against them. It was becoming very, very difficult for them. But then what happened? Have you heard about it? The gunpowder plot.
No.
Oh, Guy Fawkes.
Oh, Guy Fawkes,
yes,
sure,
exactly.
yes.
That's the gunpowder plot. He's still over there. He still gets put on top of a bonfire and burned. But this was it. This was a Catholic plot to destroy the English Parliament. And the idea was that there were cellars in the Parliament, they'd fill it with gunpowder, and when the King and all the MPs were opening Parliament, everybody would be there, you'd blow the whole thing up. It was all found out about that. It didn't go ahead, but what happened was then, of course, there was a big clampdown. This happens periodically. Yeah. There's a hysteria against Catholics. And this is making things more difficult for O'Neill. Then King James sends him a summons to come to London, and he smells a rat. He might end up in the Tower. And it's at that stage he decides to leave Ireland. The flight of the Earls in 1607, and that brought an end then to the Gaelic way of life. The most Gaelic part of Ireland, that was lost. Mid and West Ulster, right. They were gone, and now you had the plantations.
And that made room for the plantation, didn't it, at that
Absolutely.
point?
Well, it kind of did. What happened then was Chichester seized all their lands. He seized the land of the Catholics. But what he wanted to do was throw out the Catholics and bring in Protestant settlers. But the problem was there wasn't that many English Protestants who were interested in coming in and coming into war-torn Ulster. Same thing as with the Munster plantation, couldn't get enough. And then they had an idea, what about Presbyterians? Now, Presbyterians didn't recognise the king as the supreme head of the church, but they recognised him as the temporal ruler. They were also Protestant, generally loyal and English-speaking. So, not ideal, but this will be good enough.
And were they largely Scottish?
They were largely Scottish.
Yeah,
that was it. Presbyterianism was a religion that developed mainly in Scotland. They were mainly Scottish, but they were from areas of Scotland that was along the border reivers, they're still called, and they came in there. And that was already a war-torn area. For them, it was out of the frying pan and into the fire. They were poorer. They were happy enough to get land. But the Protestants, the English Protestants, weren't as inclined to come in. Another thing that's happening now at this stage is Virginia is opening up. Virginia in America as a colony. James is opening up that. Much more opportunities, cheaper land, less war-torn there. If you could get a passage to America, it was much better to go there. So the plantations, they still didn't get enough. And the result was, even though all the Catholics were to be driven out, they never were. To cut the corn and get in the harvest, you needed them. And so the undertakers very quietly kept the Catholics on. So the plantation of Ulster was only a partial success, but of course has left us problems to this day.
I never thought about the American option in parallel with this, if you know what I mean.
At the same time.
At the same time, yeah.
It's James, this is where you get...
It's James the First.
James the First.
Yes.
So you get Jamestown still in Virginia in America, the very first colony over there called after James. So all that big expansion began at the time of James. It was under the time of James. And James, when he ruled over Britain for about 22 years, it was a time of peace as well. So there was a lot of expansion there as well as that.
The Confederation of Kilkenny, again, another attempt by the Catholics to group together in some sense.
Well, then you had James, and then you had Charles. So what happened there was then, things calmed down for a while. And then what happened was, in 1641, the Catholics in Ulster rose. And they rose on a guy who was a descendant of the ancient O'Neills, Owen Roe O'Neill. And he fermented a rebellion in Ulster. Now, what was the idea of this rebellion? Independent Ireland. That's what you wanted? Not in your life. That's not what they wanted at all. Very different thinking those days. What they wanted was they would take over Ireland and then they would negotiate from a position of power. They wanted the lands that had been taken from Catholics given back and freedom to practice religion. Did they want independent Ireland? Not on your nanny. Everybody was a royalist. They all still wanted to stay under the English crown. So it's so different. It seems unusual thinking for us today. So what happened was the rebellion got out of control. And I don't know if you've heard about these. There were massacres in Ulster. A famous one that people talk about still is Portadown or Portadine, as they call it up there. Hundreds of the planters who would come in, rounded up, men, women and children, taken to a bridge and thrown into the freezing waters of the river bank. And they were thrown in naked. And if anybody managed to survive, they were met and cut to pieces when they came out. That's still very much in the Protestant consciousness. You'll still see banners about it on the 12th. So there was the whole thing got out of control. Owen O'Neill didn't intend it, but the whole hatred got out of control. But then in the end, what you had, and you mentioned that, was you had the Confederation of Kilkenny. And now that was interesting. And have you any idea? No one has, of course, I'm sure you haven't, why it was in Kilkenny.
No, I don't.
When O'Neill rose, there were certain areas of the country they didn't capture, and one of them was Dublin. There was also Cork. So that's why the Catholic Parliament was in Kilkenny, and that was made up of the old English who were in Ireland, the Norman planters who are still Catholic, and the old Irish. And they formed a parliament, but they didn't rule Dublin, and they set it up in Kilkenny. And for a while, for about 9 years, they effectively ruled Ireland, with the exception of Dublin, a few areas in the north, and Boyle, the Earl of Cork, as well as that. But the Protestants then in Ireland who were there, the new English who came in, the planters and that, they formed their own armies, and the result was the Confederate Wars.
We have to talk about Mr. Cromwell.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Now, you have the Confederate Wars in Ireland. Now, that's interesting. But what happens there is then, in the meantime, when this rebellion is going on, a war breaks out in England as well. The Civil War.
Yes.
The Civil War between Charles I and the Parliament. Now, Charles and James had ideas about being king, and I don't know if you've heard about this. You know, the divine right of kings.
Sure, of course.
That your authority comes from God alone, and you're not answerable to anybody else. Parliament wanted them to be answerable to the people. So there was a continual tension between the two. James managed to manage it, but Charles wasn't able to manage it. And there was always, as well as that, these kings were Stuarts. They came in from Scotland. They were the lineage of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was a Catholic. And they were always suspected of having Catholic sympathies by the Protestant parliaments, and probably rightly, because every one of them ultimately, though some are closet Catholics, every one of their wives was a Catholic, even though until the end with James they all said they were Protestants. They were all married to Catholics.
Yeah.
Huge suspicion about that as well. So the whole thing then broke out, and civil war broke out between Parliament, and at that stage Parliament was highly anti-Catholic, highly Puritan, and the Royalists. And now the Confederation of Kilkenny had to decide which way are we going to do.
And John, was the monarchy abolished at that point?
It was, in a kind of a way, by chopping the head off Charles eventually. Yeah. At the end of the Civil War, he lost the Civil War. So that was the interesting thing. At the end of the Civil War, you had the Royalists in Ireland fighting for the restoration of the king against a parliament who had declared the republic. Wow. It's the opposite way around completely.
And we think we have chaos now.
We have chaos now. And the chaos in Ireland, there were so many people, there were so many atrocities carried out. Do you remember, have you heard about the sack of Cashel?
Well, you were just talking to me about this off air. Yeah. Who was responsible for that?
Well, Morach O'Brien, and this shows the complexity.
Now, what year are we talking about here?
We're
roughly?
Talking about with 1647.
Okay, so mid-century. Yeah.
So okay. Morach O'Brien, and he was Morach O'Brien, Morach Agdohan, the Burner O'Brien. But he's interesting. Who is he a descendant of? He is a descendant of Brian Boru, but he was born a Protestant. He was supported the king. But then when he saw in 1644 which way the wind was blowing, he thought Parliament was winning, he joined over with Parliament, and he became leader of the parliamentary forces, that the forces who were opposing Prince Charles in Ireland. He led their armies. He went on a campaign against the Confederation of Kilkenny, and he attacked towns, and Cashel was seen as a royalist town, so he attacked Cashel. I'm sure you've heard so much about what happened on the Rock of Cashel when you were growing up. Did you hear it?
I did. I heard bits and pieces of it, but would you sum it up for me? What did happen?
Well, what happened then was, the old idea was, if you went into a church, you got sanctuary. Nobody would attack a church. But now, of course, the Protestants didn't recognise Catholic churches. So all the townspeople fled up, and some of the soldiers fled up there as well. But he attacked the rock anyway, got in over the walls there, began to try and burn them out. They fled into the cathedral, right? But a cathedral isn't easy to defend. If you're ever up there, you know the huge big windows?
I do.
And, they were the downfall of the people who were inside.
Because there was access to it,
through those.
Yeah.
And there was a massacre inside in the cathedral. They say 1,000 people were killed. Now, the soldiers who were defending it were killed, as well as that. The priests who were hiding on the high altar were dragged out and killed, as well as that.
Wow.
As well as that, women, children. When this lust gets going among people, and they were also had been reminded of the massacres 6 years later which had taken place for Protestants in Ulster. So they were in a frenzy. Now, not justifying it, I'm just saying this is how things happen in history. And you will always think the town of Cashel took a long time to recover. But the brave Burner, what did he do? He suddenly realised things weren't going so well for the Parliament. He went back and joined the Royalists after burning out the Royalists in Cashel. Wow. This is the complications of history. And he went out, and eventually when King Charles II was restored, because he had jumped ship again. He got his lands back down in Cllr and lived on to a ripe old age. I mean, that's the sort of thing that happens.
This is the real politic of the day, I guess, is it? The real politic of the day.
Yeah,
Pragmatism, I suppose.
Well, that is the thing. And even the kings, they might have the divine right, but James and Charles were continually looking over their shoulders. And even if they were favourable towards Catholics, they probably couldn't do anything about it because they knew that Parliament was behind them, and they were right. Eventually, they were deposed, and a republic was declared after about 500 or 600 years of having a king in England. There was actually a republic there for about.
So a few years after the sacking of Cashel, then Cromwell arrived with his army, didn't he?
Yeah. And that's an interesting
Tell
thing.
me about that, because there's such hatred for Cromwell here, even still. Even still.
Was he the Hitler of his time? Now, will I tell you something else? Cromwell was a relative moderate. Well, what I mean is, in England, he was relatively moderate. The Stuart kings actually put more people to death. Catholicism was illegal, but he didn't chase after the priests. If they did it in private and kept out of the way, there was no big clampdown on them. But for some reason, I don't know what it was, he developed a terrible hatred of Irish Catholics, and particularly Irish priests. Maybe because he heard exaggerated accounts, but he became extremely angry. Something like Tom Barry in the War of Independence. He had an exaggerated hatred for the Essex Regiment above all others, and the same thing seemed to happen here.
And that's why the perception of Cromwell here and the perception of Cromwell in England is totally different.
I was over there lately. There's a big statue outside, and he is seen as having gone a long way to introducing what you call the constitutional monarchy we have now, circumscribing the right of kings and that, and being relatively moderate.
But he was responsible for the execution of, was it Charles? No?
Oh, he was, yes, absolutely.
Charles,
I mean, I suppose, but Charles would have executed plenty of people himself.
Yeah.
I mean, when you lost, that's what happened to you.
You lost the head,
and everyone would have expected that. Now, funnily enough, when his son, Charles II, was restored then after Cromwell died, Cromwell's body was dug up and they hanged him again. They hanged a straw and quartered him even though he was dead. That's the hatred there was among the royalists. But among a lot of people in England, there is still a thing that in the long run, he set up the constitutional monarchy. But in Ireland, he wasn't it was, I suppose, it was genetic, it was racial cleansing really in Ireland. He came in and he seems to have this hatred. When he captured Drogheda, it wasn't just the soldiers, priests, and he hated priests, but lots of people were killed there as well.
So Drogheda, Wexford and Clonmel, of course.
Yeah, well, Clonmel, but there was no massacre at Clonmel, of course.
He just took over, was it?
Well, he did after a long siege, and lost 2,000 men of the Model Army. Clonmel held out very, very well for quite a long time. That's where Clonmel kind of put an end to his Irish campaign, because he took Drogheda. We don't know what would have happened had he taken Clonmel. He lost a lot of men, and then in the end Clonmel negotiated a surrender at the end. He never took Clonmel in the way he took Wexford and he took Drogheda. And in fact, it was after that then that he returned back to England, sort of, kind of with his tail between his legs after because Clonmel put a stop to that, as well as that. They held out very heroically. But what I'm saying is the people who remained behind were Cromwellians. They were Cromwellians and they stayed behind. And this hatred of the Catholics continued. And so what happened then was, we get the famous thing then where they felt the Catholics had to be just taken off their land. They were disloyal. And so we get the thing, to hell or to Connacht. And that was the idea. The Catholics would be driven west of the Shannon. And certainly the most successful plantation in Ireland was the Cromwellian plantation. It moved in the end, from about 50% of the land before Cromwell being held by Catholics in Ireland to about 5%. And people were driven off. And then, as well as that, he wanted to exterminate Irish priests only, not English priests, as a class. So they were hunted. And some people mix this up with the penal laws. The penal laws were much later, but priests had a bounty on their head in Cromwell's time. That's when you talk Sean Sagat and that, the famous priest hunters in Ireland. And it was, and a lot of them were brought up to Inishboffin Island, loaded on ships and sent off indentured servants, but basically as slaves to the Caribbean.
And what about the monasteries at that point?
The monasteries were gone, remember, at that stage.
They were gone.
Yeah, they were slower to go in Ireland. It was Henry VIII who abolished the monasteries. So where he ruled in Ireland, in the east of Ireland, they were abolished straight away. But in places like where the Celtic way or the Gaelic way of life still went on, where O'Neill and O'Donnell were dominant, it wasn't until the early 16th century that the last of the monasteries were abolished. And in fact, mostly they just took their land. But in the end then, some of the monasteries, admittedly, their land had gone. That had been given out as gifts to planters. But the monks still remained on in poverty in the monasteries. In fact, Holy Cross continued until the Confederate Wars and the arrival of Cromwell in Ireland. He hated monks. It wasn't just he wanted their land, he hated them. So they were all driven out of the monasteries, assassinated, or else taken off to the Caribbean.
And John, was it at this time that the monks hid their valuables?
It's hard to say. I would imagine you're talking much earlier. If you're going back to the Derry na Flan or something like that.
That was much earlier, wasn't it?
Much earlier.
Yeah.
So they would have hid their valuables, and we all say, well, it was the Vikings. But the Irish were attacking each other as well and stealing from each other. So everybody wasn't the same. But that's when the monks, that was the glory period then. It was when the Vikings arrived. That was the great flowering of Irish gold. So all these beautiful gold ornaments were here in Ireland, and of course the Vikings saw rich pickings. They were pagans, so they didn't want the altar vessels or anything like that. They wanted to melt them down into gold. But that was very, very much earlier. But then Henry dissolved the monastery. So, for example, the lands at Holy Cross, Kilcooley, were handed over to the butlers, and that was a handy way of keeping them loyal. And the butlers, by and large, not always, but in general, they stayed loyal to the English crown, and they were rewarded for their efforts.
Where are we going to go next time round?
We're going to go next now. We'll go on then from what you call the Restoration. In other words, the end of Cromwell, the Restoration, what happened under Charles, and then, of course, we're leading up to a very interesting period when you have a Catholic king, James II, who declares himself a Catholic, and he is also officially the head of the Protestant Church, and then he has a son that will continue the line. That did not go down well in Puritan circles in England, and we'll see what happened.
It'll be very interesting indeed. And in terms of the rest of Europe, at this point, the 17th century, what else was there? Wars happening everywhere?
Well, there was a huge sectarian war, the 30 Years' War, and while most of this is going on, of course, you had the Sun King, Louis XIV. He was the most powerful king in Europe, and of course, that's where Charles fled to France, when he wanted to escape, because he fled over there. He saw commonality with with a Catholic ruler over there. And then there was continual wars, because what happened is Spain, Italy and France had stayed Catholic, but Germany, largely Holland as well as that, Switzerland, that part of Europe, all went Protestant, and there was a 30 years sectarian
O'Neill
war.
and O'Donnell, they went to France. Was it France they went to?
O'Neill, yeah, they did. And O'Donnell went first to Spain. He went out first, to Hughie O'Donnell, and he died very soon afterwards. He was trying to bring back an army. Then his nephew, Rory O'Donnell, because he was the guy who went out with the flight of the Earls. They were thinking of going to Spain, but in those days, a storm actually blew them onto France, and in the end, anyway, they ended up down in Rome, and O'Neill died down in Rome in 1616.
John, it's all so fascinating. Thank you for your time today.
The flow of history.
I think it's just wonderful. Thanks, John. That's it from me. Leanne produced, Ali looks after content, and Stephen has the time tunnel on the Lunchtime Show. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye bye.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.